10 days of endless fashion, 40 brands, tons of household favorites, and 1 month of work. Welcome back to another mega video. Get very comfortable, switch all devices to quiet mode. It is time for Paris Fashion Week, Men's Week, and Haute Couture. Folks, this video just about killed us. My brain feels like tire rubber right now. We moved through the most beautiful rooms I have ever seen in my life. We dodged the pre-Olympics traffic in Paris, and we bravely stood in windowless rooms that were 115 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 46 degrees Celsius for our European friends. Okay, I know I start with a lot of excitement. Let's bring it down just a smidge and begin. Rick Owens had a landmark season for his menswear show, taking place in the massive courtyard of the Palais de Tokyo, which by now it's basically the Owens Court backyard. Rick has said before that his greatest challenge hosting a runway show here is filling the space. And he's tried a lot of different solutions. We've tried scaffolding, we've tried smoke, we've tried colored smoke a lot. We've tried a flaming tower. We've tried flaming balls. We've tried rose petals. He has even tried a huge mud pit. This season, Rick took the old Hollywood approach of filling a massive space with people. In 1994, Rick Owens started his brand in Hollywood. Then, 30 years later in Paris, he hosted a show that was called Hollywood. It featured over 200 people, all dressed in white, marching together in groups around the courtyard to the second movement of Beethoven's Symphony No. 7. There are 10 unique looks. Each phalanx of models wears identical looks. The models are a sampling of the culture around Owens Corp. It's just some of the people who have played a small part in the Owens brand. And each in their own way, they represent that brand out in the wider world. These people come in all heights, all genders, all sizes and ethnicities. And everyone looked fantastic. One group held a steel cone tower that featured contortionists and a single model holding a massive flag featuring Owens' own arm and hand holding another hand. That other hand belongs to an industrial designer that works at Owens Corp who designed the flag. When you back up, this phalanx in particular looks like the bed throne of an ancient king. Okay, so 10 looks, right? Most of those looks have a precedent in Rick's wider body of work. For example, this structured look has been iterated on a great deal in the last 5 years. These are a ton of examples of that. This awesome look here is a little bit of a jump. Rick started doing footwear that resembled a medical brace. He's iterated on that a little bit, and now we see that idea making the jump to become a shoulder proposal. And speaking of shoulders, most deep Rick heads will recognize what's now known as the tech shoulder. I like this shoulder a lot personally because it makes the wearer look intimidating, but simultaneously it makes them look very afraid, like their shoulders are bunched up, like they're bracing for something. This look and this look don't have any touchstones from Rick's body of work that I could find personally, but they contain many of his motifs. It's a leather jacket. There's an asymmetrical zipper on it. There's a cowl neck. Again, that same shoulder from this look here, and the headwear is similar to Spring 2009. This look here and the dudes that are actually carrying the cone tower are wearing Rick's cult classic banana sweater. It's a modular piece that is perfect for runway shows because of how many different ways you can style it. The pyramid itself is based on Tatlin's Tower, which is a utopian Soviet design that was never actually built. For Rick, Tatlin's Tower was first used in his Babel runway shows as kind of a modern metaphor for the Tower of Babel, which for Rick, kind of taken outside of its biblical context and like the moral of the story, for Rick it's kind of this idea of humans trying to do something that is impossible and then failing miserably and then standing up and saying, okay, I guess let's just try again. That combination of pointlessness but endurance is something that interests him a lot. And there's even quieter echoes of Rick's oeuvre here as well. Like, this specific phalanx is a collaboration with Tanya Vidic, who's a recent fashion graduate who has done a great deal of work doing distinctive knitwear that features a technique called partial knit, which is one of those processes where you can learn it maybe in a few hours, but it takes a lifetime to execute well. Rick's collaboration with Vidic is part of his ongoing collaboration with different independent artists and designers. He's previously worked with Stray 2K, Swamp God, and a bunch of others. This show was long. It was almost half an hour. An average runway show can be as short as 7 minutes, and usually they're under 15. But this presentation very purposefully took up a lot of time and a lot of physical space. Probably the most wildly different format for a runway show that we've seen in the last 5 years. So why is Rick doing this? What does this mean? So Rick's last 2 shows were held in his Parisian home and showroom. He said that he felt like a huge, loud show didn't really feel appropriate for the times that we're living in. And those shows were amazing. Rick's models, styling, and his clothes are terrifying when they are less than a foot away from you. I mean, like, what? Is there any confusion here? In the best way. Like, obviously, that's what we're going for. But despite his apartment actually being very large for a Parisian apartment, it just isn't the same size as the Palais de Tokyo, so it radically limited the guest list. So the return to the Palais de Tokyo and the massive number of models further reinforced unity within his community. And make no mistake, Rick Owens is a community. There's a small group of young women, probably students, who were attending this show with their professor. It was pretty clearly their first runway show, and they were just dressed in normal street clothes. And while I was kind of holding my spot in standing room and Daniela was finding her seat, we were kind of watching them kind of take everything in. And there was a lot of just like beaming huge smiles and like excitedly but like quietly talking to each other while they just kind of looked around at the people that come to these runway shows. I feel like most teenagers of every gender should experience some environment like this before they become like, real world adults. Just some small experience to say that mom and dad are maybe not always right. Like, you don't have to wear a bra if you don't want to. And you don't have to have long hair. You can have tattoos on your hands. The nose ring looks fine. And then, look, this guy shaved his eyebrows off. This woman has a full scalp tattoo, and they turned out okay. Rick gave this great quote to Vogue for fall 2020, where he said, quote, "I want to be someone who says, you're fine. You're going to do it this way, and you're going to be great. You're never going to be that kind of beautiful. You're going to be my kind of beautiful." And I think about that quote all the time. The entire presentation felt like a solemn ceremony. And it's interesting, there's not a lot of ceremony in modern life. All of the ceremony of modern life is either extremely easy to make fun of, mega boring like graduations, or it's like tied to some crazy event like a death or a wedding, or at best, ceremony just feels quaintly outdated. I think that there is something inside of people that wants ceremony and ritual, but it just doesn't work well with the modern world. So when someone is able to bring ceremony and make it successful outside of an event like a death or a wedding, it's a very rare thing. And that is what I witnessed here. Absolutely beautiful. All right, first of all, I have to make an apology. Nicola, I am so sorry for mispronouncing your name for years. It is Nicola di Felice. I'm sorry, dude. Jean-Paul Gaultier has shown on the Couture calendar for forever. Now the company brings in a different designer every time they show for a guest presentation. And they haven't really so much selected the designers based on hype. It's mostly just been people who the industry really likes a lot. Really talented people. Simone Rocha, Glenn Martins, Chitose Abe from Sakai. They tend to get really good people. And Nicola is another one of those really excellent people. I've always really loved Courrèges, the new Courrèges, for the way that it blends commercialism and... Oh man, there's a ton of people here. All right, let's just go see what it is. This is our first Jean-Paul Gaultier show, and it happens to be at a time when the man, Mr. Gaultier, is no longer at his eponymous house. A part of me is somewhat sad that I don't get to experience the man's own legendary runway shows, But it is really cool that he has continued to attend the shows in person. He sits front row and he encourages the new talent. He's beaming the entire time. We got there pretty early and it was already a packed space. Mr. Gaultier's retirement has enabled the JPG brand to become the most successful designer in residence program in the entire industry. Other brands have tried to recruit new designers on a short-term basis for varying degrees of success, but Jean-Paul Gaultier has consistently gotten the most press for doing so, first of all, and also gotten the best results on the runway itself. One really fascinating element about this designer in residence program is that you get to watch a lot of these designers do couture for the first time in their careers. On this channel, we've often praised Di Felice as the best commercial designer currently working. At Courrèges making Pret-a-Porter, he consistently shows fantastic ideas that could make a more timid customer try something daring for the first time. It was a blast getting to watch him explore his own design language with the freedom that comes from couture. Felice got to drill down further on his experimental side, and it was awesome to see. So much of this collection is about how far you can take the motif of the hook and eye. It is everywhere here. It's keeping pattern pieces together, it's accessorizing a bodice, a whole gown. It's a piece of fashion hardware that tends to get overlooked, only relegated to like bra clasps and in combination with zippers to put on a particularly tight-fitting dress. We may even see a bra clasp being used as a futuristic motif here, which is great and lines up with Nicola's squared-off neckline, which is just as beautiful here as it is in his work at Courrèges. Hook and eyes also have this sort of racy connotation to them as well, right? Like, unlike their boring cousins, buttons and zippers, hook and eyes kind of compel you to imagine what is underneath them. A lot of this connotation comes from corsets, right? Which is the most common clothing item to use a lot of hook and eyes to form a straight line. And that same what's underneath feeling moves through the first few looks in a totally different but awesome way. They cover the most distinguishing parts of the face using a dress. We see 6 iterations on this idea, and frankly, this is so great, it could have been the whole show. It doesn't do full, awesome, creepy incognito like in Demna's work at Balenciaga, and it doesn't have the tone of the extreme sun protection trend in China. Nicola's proposal has this brilliant, raw sexiness to it that we don't get to see much on the runway, and certainly not in couture now. And I just think that we don't see a lot of sexy on runways right now because designers and audiences both think of the sexy thing as being kind of too easy. Because with sexiness, you can always just throw them in a slingshot bikini and call it a day. But Nicola has found such beautiful little ways to make couture level work also be sexy. There is nothing easy or any kind of cop-out about the beautiful tension in this bust detail. There is nothing easy about the way that these swag looks are handled. For me, one of the great pleasures of watching Nicola's shows is the exciting execution of very small details. Like this little bit of drape off the back, stunning. The way that the tension of this dress seems to swirl up from the model's feet with a serif-like flick off the back of her neck. The seamless incorporation of corsets into full-length dresses. And I know this is not a new idea, but the way these corsets are so effortlessly handled throughout the show, you'd look at this skirt and wonder if skirts have ever been done any other way. Some of the most obvious Jean-Paul Gaultier references were left out purposefully, and I'm actually really pleased to see that. I mean, no one wants to see a genius designer's work relegated simply to sailor hats, mariner stripes, cone bras, cyber dots. I mean, no artist ever in the history of artists has been flattered when someone goes, "Oh, you're the tattoo top guy. You're the tattoo top guy." But I was definitely more excited to see the nuanced Jean-Paul Gaultier references here, like piercings and nose rings from the Spring '94 show. That was a huge part of the bohemian eclectic JPG look at that time. There's tons of examples of the one shoulder look in Jean-Paul Gaultier archives where he would style a look with a vest or a jacket on only one shoulder. And I love how De Felice interprets this in different ways and incorporates Jean Paul's styling into his garment construction. That's a subtle execution of a subtle house code. And I do want to say something to the folks that thought that this should have referenced the archives in a much more direct and obvious and instantly recognizable way. Jean Paul Gaultier was originally working during an immensely stuffy time in fashion. When most of the industry was focused on being as perfect as humanly possible, Jean Paul Gaultier shows just felt like a blowout bash at the Paradise Garage or something. There were other crazy, awesome designers at the time, but generally, Jean Paul Gaultier was reacting against the stuffiness of the 1980s fashion system. But importantly, that same flavor of Jean Paul Gaultier crazy party runway show, that is much more the standard now, not only in Parisian runway shows, but in runway shows all over the world. And that fact is a big part of why he is such a crucial designer. Everything before him feels strangely obsolete, and so much after him bears the mark of his work. To De Felice, it seems as though the meaning behind Jean Paul's work was more powerful than any of the hallmark brand codes. And at the end of the day, copying obvious references is not as effective as following the spirit of the man. You just find a cool, sexy way to go against the grain. That's what Jean Paul Gaultier means to me at the end of the day anyway. This was an outstanding show. I am so excited. When it is Paris Men's Week, there are two young brands that I look forward to the most, and we are going up to one of them now. This is Kartik Research. I have never found a young designer with so much passion for doing things the right way. Up until this point, all of their fabrics have used no electricity. They're all hand woven, which is a standard that most mega luxury houses don't even attempt to do. I am extremely excited to see what he has on offer this season. We're getting to watch him grow into a fully bloomed business in real time. It's really exciting. That was unbelievable. That was so good.
It was a step up, I think, from last time, yeah.
It was a big step up, yeah. And it seems like you're able to experiment a little bit more with the type of the variety of textiles. Can you just tell us a little bit about kind of where your head was at with just textiles specifically?
You know, weird. This is like a kind of weird point to make considering how much of cotton is in the collection. But I don't like how cotton looks on the runway. I agree
with that, actually.
I like linen a lot more. There's something about it, you know. And I don't know how to describe it, it's just a visual thing. So we worked with like handloom weavers in Madhya Pradesh, like the central part of India, which is a region we hadn't really touched yet, to work on a lot of the suiting linens. So a lot more tailoring, over 50% is tailoring at this point, which is a big change from last time. Technique-wise, you know, it's just the same stuff, but we're trying to get better at it. So like hand embroidery, still hand embroidery, just more detail. I think I was also focused on like maybe, I do always have this thing, because we are an independent business, we do need to sell these pieces to keep doing shows like this. I'm pretty cognizant of like, oh, is there a store where this works? Even if it's like Dover Street, you know, where it can be a little bit more avant-garde, a little bit more expensive. But this time I was like, oh, maybe we can include a few looks that I really just don't care if it sells or not. So like this look, just the embroidery is going to cost me $500 in production, you know. So I don't know, like we priced it, what, $2,000, I guess, you know. Does it sell? It doesn't really matter to me, but I wanted to include it because it's just that painstakingly beautiful.
See, there's a lot in the show notes about kind of your changing views about your home and the country and the way that the culture is kind of being presented outside of India. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more extensively about what that is?
Yeah, but after the last show did well on like social media. So after the last one, I got invited to this like cabinet of India dinner with like 20 young entrepreneurs. And it was nice to be like listened to, but it's, you know, someone asked me last time, do you feel any pressure? I was like, no, it's new, people are just excited about it. This time, it was like, okay, no, but if you're the one Indian brand representing like Indian artisanship and the real sort of worldview of what this is, we do need to really make sure that it's handled responsibly. And so I wanted to like ground the clothes in some sort of like reality, uniform, how people dress for like pilgrimages, different things like that.
What would be a way to represent that irresponsibly? Like, what are you trying to avoid?
It's not irresponsible, and that's probably the wrong word, but we lean heavily into like the romantic side of India. Like the palaces, we'll shoot a video in like very specific art direction, but it's very minor things. In general, like these clothes in that context would look the same. It's just a function of.
Is it just like a fear of like almost kind of turning it into a cartoon rather than a real reflection of life?
Yeah, exactly. I think but the point is the cartoon side exists, and we do want to show that. There is like a real beauty to the architecture and things that you can't find anywhere else. So that's core to the DNA. We're balancing that in some way.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely ways to exaggerate it and represent it poorly and stuff.
And like I think it's like wooden beads or something, on the pants that's hanging. That would be like a garland on a religious pilgrimage, and different ways of like finding hope in what's like a pretty disturbed reality.
Cool.
Yeah.
Would you say that this is generally the piece that you're most proud of this season, or is there something else where you really nailed it?
Work-wise, but this is like the cricket jersey reference. That's pretty cool. And I'm happy with a lot of the tailoring. I think is just much stronger this time. We did like structured shoulders for the first time.
Yeah, tell me about the structure. What shape are you trying to get with the jackets?
It's like slightly bigger shoulders. Everything otherwise is pretty slouchy. I thought we could like add that just to like show our development as a designer as well. Yeah.
Thanks, man. I can't actually do this because of copyright reasons, but what I was going to do was get off the subway and be like, guys, where are we? And then the camera was going to go up and it was going to say Les Goblins, and then a Tyler the Creator beat was going to start. It was going to be so sick. Someday. Okay. Homme, Plissé, Issey, Miyake. This is the men's line. Satoshi Kondo, the creative director, who's doing an incredible job, is not part of this line. It's designed by a team. I don't know how much y'all are keeping up with the lore, but my little brother Isaac, who has appeared in multiple episodes, this is like one of the only brands during Fashion Week that he actually likes. He is not a fashion guy. He's a medical professional. Okay, so the show opened with two people using or playing sound tubes. You may have used sound tubes in school. I did not realize until I was researching for this video that there are some people who take sound tubes extremely seriously. But that's fine. I mean, I take pants extremely seriously, so. The sound tubes were actually the first indication that this collection is inspired by wind. I love Homme Plissé. It's a great reminder that you don't need 40 different fabrics to execute a collection. You just need one that is super adaptable, 2 or 3 at most if you want to spice things up. Using the same fabrics over and over again is also what enables Homme Plissé to iterate their work. Every collection kind of builds on the one before it. And that means that they are iterating conceptually as well. Homme Plissé has done suits before. It's a consistent offering from them. These are some examples of some suits that they have offered in the past, which are pretty distinctly different than this suit from this season. And maybe there's something about the pleated fabric always being so constant that makes it kind of hard to pick up the details, but the pleats are different here. The layers are different, and of course the fit is quite different. This season's suits are much slouchier, much breezier. One of the proposals even comes with shorts. And slouchier suits obviously come with the current look of men's silhouettes, and it also aligns well with the wind theme. And this collection, more than any other Homme Plissé in recent memory, does feel the most open and breezy, which is a pretty big accomplishment considering that the whole brand is known for being very airy. The courtyard square that was the runway this season was dotted with these sculptures by Vincent de Belleval, who's an artist who's all about spatial and sculptural design. I don't know if Vincent would call himself this, but I'm kind of inclined to call him a light and space artist. He's done professional runway lighting and design setups for Kate and Rag & Bone as well. He took this season's wind theme and just crushed it with these lightly mechanized plants? Okay, here's the deal. I think they're supposed to be tulips. That's the only flower I could really see getting changed into this shape, like tulips before they fully bloom, just the bulbs. Last thing on the art plants, they move organically. Even when they're all together, they're not perfectly in sync. De Belleville said that this was meant to be, quote, a field of sculptures that are strong enough to generate their own movements, but supple enough to react with the wind. Okay, wait, did you catch that? This is so cool. So they're all being programmed to have these little motors inside them that move them back and forth. And technically those motors are all moving together, but they're just weak enough so that if the wind picks up in the courtyard on like a few of them, they'll go out of sync. So there's this all mechanized and planned, but there's a little bit of organicness to it. It's a beautifully subtle execution of this season's theme. More brands should make use of Belleville. He crushed it. So back to wind. The clothes were, of course, designed to speak to this wind theme. Here are their customizable kite silhouettes this season. Here are the kite coats. And they do look very kite-like. The bottoms of these pieces seem to be lifting. But Homme Plissé doesn't stop there. First off, via Vogue, we learned that the entire studio team went skydiving for research for this collection, which is exceptionally cool. And they seem to have taken some good inspiration for these looks here. The first 3 multicolored looks in the show are printed with a check design that is distorted to appear as though the print itself was victim to the wind. We've seen this execution done in previous Issey Miyake shows where the print implies something that is much more nuanced about the theme of the collection. Like in this one, we're not just repeat printing the wind emoji onto sweatshirts. But what we've seen over and over again with this brand is that each season's theme goes into the pattern cutting itself, which is visible in these windswept shirt looks. Plackets are twisted to one direction because of the signature pleating, which you'll notice is done on the bias here. The consistency that comes from this company could mean that we're already in the Issey Miyake revival era. And overall, I am thrilled with the work that is coming out of this brand right now. All right, so I try to be objective and not have like my favorites, but there's some brands that I just especially look forward to. Airei is one of those brands. Drew Curry, the founder and designer at Airei, makes some of the most compelling product in modern fashion. We actually first spoke to Drew on our 2nd ever Fashion Week trip. Again, we are on our 9th this time. I wanted to go to the courtyard here at Dover Street Market, Paris, and do an intro where I first stood before seeing Airei the first time, but then we saw Drew in the courtyard and we got distracted.
Oh, there he is. He's right there.
How are you?
You know that a lot of the themes that I'm exploring have to do with life and death and the human experience. As opposed to just focusing on the beginning or end of life this time, I wanted to focus on the middle, like the journey that we're all on. And so in thinking about that journey, I thought literally about, this path that we're walking. And so I wanted to do a collection that was like kind of brown and muddy and dirty. And, I was thinking about it as if like, what if this was the only outfit that somebody had and they had worn it like over decades? That's kind of how I wanted it to feel. So the clothes are really worn. There's a lot of like dimension to the fabric that looks like it's been broken down. And then I added the extra challenge of not including any black. And so it's the first time I've done a collection that's just been brown with some natural.
Can I ask you about how we executed a certain thing here? Because a lot of times, I think most people who are fashion designers, usually this happens in school, I think, where they say like, well, the coolest garment that I've ever seen is this shirt that I thrifted or that was like my granddad's and it's so dirty now, and I want to capture something that feels like that. And then they find out that making clothes that look worn in is extremely challenging to do, to scale. Can you tell? But these don't suffer from that problem at all. They really capture that like muddy, extremely used feel, but this still feels like a new product that is worth paying money for. Can you just talk about how you were able to achieve that from multiple different fabrics and shapes and everything?
I needed to find things with a lot of texture and a lot of dimension. And so I worked with a new for me, but artisanal workshop in Japan that makes fabrics. And so when thinking about the Traveler, this is literally mud dyed. So this is mud dyed silk. And so this is the actual color of the fabric here. But you can see the mud. So the mud is basically painted on top of the fabric. Because it's dirt and water, you get a lot of the dimension coming out because it's not purely dyed like most of our garments are.
It's extremely, like, very cozy, almost like homeware type of stuff.
Right.
Really, really cozy.
Yeah.
I would have never guessed it was silk. That's crazy.
And then we also did some pieces that are dyed with persimmons, the fruit. And so we fabric dyed it as opposed to piece dye, almost like a camouflage pattern that comes out naturally. So we worked with Norla again for the second time and hand felted fabric. So this is brown on brown, again creating that worn in color.
And what's this one?
But
made
all
of?
done by hand. This is 100% yak wool.
Yeah, because yak wool has this wonderful sponginess to it. That's just like, it's like perfect for blankets, and then using it in clothes, it really feels like you're like taking your comforter with you around.
Absolutely, yeah.
Super
And
soft.
because this is a spring collection, you're able to get this piece that feels like it has a lot of weight to it, but is actually like just as light as a trucker jacket or a cotton piece that you would wear. This is not a mud dye on the denim, but that was the inspiration for this piece. So I thought it would be a bit fun. You know, I never do pieces that are purposely distressed. A lot of it is just what happens naturally in making the garment. So we have it in the clean, natural denim made in Italy, but also had this like kind of labor jacket piece. The idea of protection is something that I'm always going back to. And so this is 50% metal and 50% silk.
Cool.
So I was thinking almost about medieval chainmail in a way. And I loved the polarity of having like this silk, you know, this naturally like really beautiful soft material mixed with something really hard and strong. And so that duality I'm looking for, you know, through the collections, whether that's an idea or a literal fabric.
Now, when I turn this towards the light, it has a little bit of a reflective character to it. Is that the metal, or
that's
is it
the
just
metal?
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then we did a bit more of it with this piece by adding a slight bit of wire to the zipper. So you have this collar that you can like really play with, and it's almost like pausing it in the middle of like a windstorm.
Yeah, so like, just like, that's so cool. Awesome.
Wow.
Turn this all the way up. Yep. So cool.
So this is with that same artisanal Japanese workshop. This is a linen organic cotton mix.
Yeah, this feels great.
So even something like the mesh, which usually is like kind of a throwaway fabric that people do as a mid layer, we're like finding, you know, the best fabric possible. Yeah, so it has that natural earthy feel to it. Mm-hmm. Exploring more of the leather goods. So we're working with Echo Leather now, which is based in the Netherlands. They have the best leather in the world. Yeah. And so this we burned ourselves to add that kind of smoke effect to it. And the inspiration actually behind the silhouette was the giant construction bags that you'll see like a forklift carrying cement or gravel. And so that's our version of like a tote bag, is doing this like construction bag.
Extremely special moment. We're walking up to our first couture show with Iris van Herpen. I do not think it is hard to argue that Iris is the best fashion designer currently living. I certainly can't think of anyone who is beating her in couture right now. There's a lot of talk in fashion of kind of regretting that you weren't alive for certain eras, like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be incredible to be alive during Cristobal Balenciaga's era? Wouldn't it be incredible to have been able to go to the original McQueen shows? No one ever mentions that you are currently alive while Iris van Herpen is actively putting out new work. This is the type of work that people will be looking back on romantically in 25 years. This is beautiful, completely unexpected, very, very beautiful.
Thank you.
I want to hear a little bit about technique for this, because you obviously have an enormous roster of techniques that you developed. Are there any new techniques that are represented in the room today?
It's a combination. Like, there's techniques that I've been working on for a longer period of time that have had their own evolution within my own craftsmanship. One of them is visible here. It's a very old technique of hand plisséing, which is a technique of bondage that you're seeing here, and at the same time also 3D printing, where I've been experimenting with a hybrid of different structures. Yeah, a contrast between the more traditional techniques and the more modern techniques, and to find a natural evolution in between them.
Absolutely. So you're finding ways to combine handwork, and in this case plissé, with very modern things like 3D printing.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, but make them not come from different worlds, but because our past is always connected to our future, and it's ultimately a cycle. So I'm trying not to bring in a differentiation, but I'm trying to really connect the past to the future. And if I look at the other sculptures, they have again a different set of techniques, where I've been working on dyeing on silk. I've been doing that in my couture more often, but this time I have been draping with oil paint onto the canvas.
Wow.
And the canvas that you're seeing is a transparent tulle that I've been using in the couture a lot as well. Like often I like to think of the body as a canvas, so I directly drape onto the work, onto the body, and now I've been doing the same thing up in the air.
Very good, very good. What led you to the decision of putting the models up against a literal canvas, as if it is the art itself? Because I think most people do consider your dresses to be art, but this was such a literal way of presenting that. What led you to the girls on the wall idea?
It was two things. One of the things was that in this collection, if I can call it a collection, I started working on the aerial sculptures. And they naturally elevated into the air, and I wanted to do the same with the performers, to really bring them in the same universe and not to make a differentiation between couture and art, but to have them in the same setting so that people can experience them very symbiotically. And there was also an element of time. I've been working on the sculptures for a year and on the couture pieces for 6 months. So there is an immense amount of love and craftsmanship into them, and the one-way setting doesn't always feel as if it's doing the work righteous, because people cannot really take their own time with the work, and I really wanted to create a more personal connection between the audience and the body works, where people can, I don't know, take 15 minutes if they want to understand the work or to see the craftsmanship. And it's really about, stretching time and the perception of it.
I'm really glad you made that point, because I do feel like because you have so much done things your own way and you've kind of carved out your own space, that it's interesting that the format of a typical runway show kind of just doesn't fit. The box is too small. These girls were incredible actresses because they really embodied the mood. Are you wanting to switch more heavily into the art world because fashion, like kind of similar to the runway format, fashion isn't fitting everything that you want to do, or is art just an extra thing on top of it?
Yeah, it's definitely about finding freedom in my way of expressing, and it will be both the bodyworks, the couture, and the aerial formats. I've also been doing some things in architecture, and I just don't want to limit myself into any formats. I think the format of an exhibition is a very beautiful one, but if I would be only doing that, I would miss the human presence. So I think this is a very good example of me bringing those two worlds together and not having to choose one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Something that I have loved about the way you move through your process of design is that you take a lot of inspiration from nature, but it's not like, oh, frogs are so beautiful, we'll paint a frog onto the jacket. It seems like you more often look at the sometimes even microscopic processes that create nature and are more inspired by that process of nature itself rather than objects. Could you kind of tell me what part of the natural world you've been thinking about lately?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I actually moved outside of the city 2 years ago, and that has a big influence on the works that you see today.
Very good.
I'm present in nature, surrounded in nature on a daily basis, and that has been really wonderful.
This is beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Beautiful question.
Appreciate it. We are heading over to Auralee. Last men's season, was our first Auralee show, and I was super impressed. They do a really good job handling color, they do great basics, and it seems like material is one of their focuses, the textiles themselves. In the context of runway shows, minimalism kind of has you looking at the materials as much as you can tell just with your eyes, has you looking at the styling, and it has you looking at like what is going to be the one very subtle thing that's going to make this noticeable among the many other brands that are trying to make a minimalist offering. I'm so sorry for saying this, but we're looking for the je ne sais quoi. When you first see it, or if you see it too quickly, it may not be easy to take in what Auralee is all about. It's just beautifully simple. And that sort of doesn't mean much until you learn that all of their fabrics, I repeat, all of them, are developed by designer Ryota Iwai and are produced exclusively in Japan. Care can't always be seen with the eye, though Auralee does such a good job with styling that it makes it even more obvious how much care is placed into these looks. But, as is usually the goal with more minimal brands, the care is meant to be felt on your skin. Minimalist brands tend to require a different way of seeing out of the fashion-loving public. We tend to have a much harder time picking up on what minimal brands are doing with design when it's distilled down into what may seem like a collection of basics at first. This could be seen as a downside to talking about more minimally leaning brands generally, but minimalism also requires a luxuriousness that definitely doesn't read the same when the fabrics look cheap or just are ultra commonplace. And I think you'll notice just looking at the collection that Auralee does not suffer from this problem at all. So Auralee balls out and in the process creates a sensible and pretty luxurious bunch of garments that aren't intended to speak very loudly at all. What Auralee is pitching us in their custom textiles is showing how winter staples can be used during the summer. Cashmeres and wools. And certainly everything is more luxurious than just the standard cotton. One time in an interview with the Fédération de la Haute Couture de la Mode, Mr. EY said that he doesn't want to, quote, define the wearer or push an aesthetic, end quote. The show notes tell us that there's a bit of prep in this collection, but that seems to be the closest anything in the way of a particular aesthetic gets for this particular collection. And I think that's why this has some kind of, how you say, je ne sais quoi about it. The ethos of the brand seems very in line with EY's biggest inspiration, which is Helmut Lang. Nothing about these clothes are particularly similar to Helmut's body of work, where Helmut would have been much sportier, I think. Auralee is very crisp and bookish. But EY's goal is to capture the idea of the coolest casual clothes in a different era from Helmut Lang, where, like, in the present, what you're wearing when you leave the house speaks louder than it ever has. There's something here that feels different, but it's hard to put your finger on. I think that we're also used to seeing aesthetics with their boring busyness shoved at us through TikToks and ad campaigns and even runway shows that it's kind of hard to take in just a collection of well-considered clothes. Like, there is no prepackaged costume for you to step into. The clothes are not for a cyber goth or soft girl or a coquette or a wet punk. Or I guess, like, this could be. I mean, at the end of the day, this is just a collection of well-designed clothes that are for everybody. And, like, imagine that. Well-made clothes that are for everybody. All right, listen up, fellas. We got to talk. Even if Hermès is not, like, your thing, first of all, it should be. But second of all, you could learn a lot from the way that they handle this very traditional but completely singular menswear, which is led by industry veteran Véronique Nichanian. Women designing menswear is already very hard to come by in the industry. Like, I think we all have our few favorites, but Véronique has managed to ascend to, in a lot of ways, the absolute height of menswear. She has been so successful at this job that I think of her as the step forward for traditional menswear, which is a segment of the industry that typically is so opposed to change that they would rather spend decades squabbling about millimeters in a shoulder rather than doing anything current. But even the most traditional dressers would find Miss Nichanian's designs to be undistracting, very tasteful. They might even love them. It's hard to achieve that, especially with a spring-summer show that is about the beach. There's a quote that I really love and I quote all the time on this channel, which is that women's wear is a very big circle. And as a designer, your job is to carve out a very distinct small circle within that huge circle. Menswear is a much smaller circle. And as a designer, your job is to, with this collection, just slightly move that circle outwards. Miss Nichanian's work is absolutely responsible for pushing out that circle, and we have to get much closer to see how. So this jacket plays with a collar toggle to create this, which I don't have a name for, but I love. It's this fetishistic element of menswear where that one button is enough to make you rethink your relationship with jackets. Like, friendship ended with normal collars. Now collar button toggle is my best friend. The big takeaway here is that the talent of Véronique's work exists in these little details that could shake you into a new relationship and experience with your clothes entirely. Even the bare ankles in this collection are just subtle enough as a design choice, but also that choice sets up such an elegant tone for this proposal. It's the beach. Why would you want your pants to break at your sandals? Like, this is the length of pant that you are meant to wear if you are going to the beach but not getting in the ocean. Another example that I love is this shirt that lets you mix wearing a shirt for summer with a built-in twilly. And if you don't know what twillies are, they are these little lengths of silk that Hermès sells with these beautiful graphic design prints on them. I wear one almost every single day with these like palladium beads that are also from Hermès. A lot of people use them to protect the handles of their very expensive bags so they don't end up like Kim Kardashian's bag, but really you can use them for anything. I mean, it's the best silk in the world. It feels incredible. So I just use it as like a general accessory. And Danny says that it makes me look, Danny says that it makes me look like a dapper little man, is what Danny wrote. I absolutely love and collect twillies now. They're incredible for styling. Beirendonck works that brilliant styling idea in with the shirt itself. This is so simple that you assume it kind of wouldn't work, but especially when this is made out of this gorgeous nubuck calfskin, it almost looks like if there was one garment that ever knew what it was like to experience dignity, it's this shirt. Incredible standout piece. And Hermès is sort of known for this ability for like endless customization with their products. And if you had your own twillies like I do, you could just swap them out super easily. I can't believe I am saying this. This is so rare in fashion. The functionality here isn't a gimmick. It's just a good, effortless idea. But something that I think a lot of men could get pretty excited about with this collection is the following lambskin sweatshirt. This thing feels incredible. It feels like summer leather, which is never a thought that has even occurred to me. But as an idea, it makes so much sense for Hermès to do. Their leather is so amazing. Like, once you have had the tactile experience of handling some of their softer leathers, you would also want to figure out a way to wear it just all the time. Other great techniques include this floral hand embroidery, which is made of a waxed thread. Waxed thread. Like when you run your hand over it, it feels like rubber. It's crazy. Truly, the material choice here creates such a wonderful tactile experience. Also, this bag, such a niche product, but this bag is meant for you to carry your art supplies to a beautiful outdoor location to paint. This bag is the famous women's bag, the Garden Party, which is being used as a very appropriate beach tote for men. And if Hermès on the beach doesn't sound like a good idea, just look at these lots of pictures of Marc Jacobs doing just that. He seems happy. This is so cool. I couldn't help but notice that the primary print for this season, which was featured in looks where the models sported these tattoos that extend the design onto their bodies. You see like this element here and this element here. This is a temporary tattoo to continue the design. There's a lot going on here, so we need to talk about it in detail. Hermès has had many of the world's best graphic design and art talent creating legendary designs for their silks. Like Rei Kawakubo did one time, Daniel Clowes, the comic artist, he made one. It is extremely well curated, and this design is no different. It's called
Instruction du Roi,
which refers to a book about the dressage style of horse riding that was written for the young French king Louis XIII. The designer, named Henri Dourigny, is responsible for this historic maison design. He took a look in the back of that book and found that there were carvings of recommended horse bits for the king to use. And those drawings were then arranged into this gorgeous scarf design, which is reminiscent of 17th century France. This scarf was first released in 1993 and has continued to be a hit for Hermès, and they've continued to release reworked versions of that same design often, including this one, which is currently on their website. And by the way, I found out about that history that I just told you from the description on their website. Like, Hermès has such a reverence internally for the artists that they trust to create their designs. So that's the print, but the tattoos have just got to be a reference to the work of the former Hermès artistic director, Martin Margiela, specifically his spring 1992 collection, where Martin painted the models' arms and hands to match the print on their clothes. There are these big industry nostalgia trends that kind of come around in cycles and that brands profit off of. Hermès doesn't participate in any of that. They find real ways to honor their designers and artists in a way that feels much more honest. Miss Nachanian's contributions are creating an added foundation for Hermès because, as a company, they prize their heritage so deeply. Really excited for this one. We're going up to Bianca Saunders. Bianca took a couple of seasons off, but we interviewed her about 3 months ago, and I'm actually really glad that we talked to her during a cool down time for her. She is still chock full of ideas. There was this oversized shoulder that was tasteful. Like, OMG, a tasteful oversized shoulder? This woman is insane. Welcome back to Runway Shows. This was marvelous. How did it feel to come back?
Amazing. I'm still buzzing. I'm like, did this all happen just now? It went by so quickly, but I'm very grateful to be here and stuff. Yeah.
You were like beaming when you came back up the stairs. You were so happy. It was so cool to see.
Yeah, that was. I was hoping I wasn't smiling too hard, but yeah.
I want to hear a little bit about the book that kind of brought all this about. Kind of tell us how you came into the book, and then just sort of what specifically you took from the book that you liked.
So when I started the research, I was like looking at it in terms of like, okay, I'm going to go to Jamaica this year. I haven't been there in like 8 years, which has been a long time. And of course it is like such a big inspiration to me, and like it's something that always like keeps me very warm. Am I going to feel like a tourist? And then I was going for my research. We started the collection, and I came across these interesting images by Bradley Smith, who was a journalist, but he also did photography as well too. And he photographed like people that worked at the resort in like a very interesting way. So like whether they were an ironing lady, they'll be ironing in like front of like a still background. And I think it had like a very Richard Avedon sort of like effect to it, and I wanted to kind of like emulate the tailoring, but in like the proportions and stuff like that. So
it's kind of reflecting on sort of controversial part of Jamaican culture, which is that it's like the tourists essentially have kind of taken over the island in a way.
Yeah. I guess the formative of like tourism, like that sort of thing. But in like a fun sort of way. I think I always like to have that element of fun to my work. So yeah.
Tell me about the shape of the neck, the huge like cowl looking neck.
Oh yeah. So I think that's something that we've continued on from like AW24, and I really wanted to kind of keep that collar like a strong piece, and then like adding like the handkerchief extension piece like on the front of the denim is like something that I wanted to have it continuous for the brand.
Very cool. Love it. Thank you so much, Bianca. This is beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, rainy morning, and we're having to rush a whole bunch. Going up to Junya Watanabe. Men's, women's, doesn't matter. The day that he's on, he's the first show. The first time we saw Junya, we were walking up and we were like 1 minute late. And I could see models walking inside the building, and I was like, oh shit, how did we miss this? No! Turns out that they were just rehearsing. That was also the first time that I saw Rei Kawakubo in person, and there is something very poetic about my first sighting of her being through a window. Men's and women's for Junya are radically different. Men's is a lot more subdued and falls kind of more into the category of awesome everyday type gear. Actually...
Are they really on the rack?
Yeah. My first designer purchase was a secondhand, because I was broke, pair of Junya Watanabe corduroy pants that are made of hemp, which I am not going to show you close-ups of because I wore those things into the ground. I wore them until there were holes in them. Okay, so usually all the shows in the extended Comme des Garçons universe, of which Junya is a major planet, are extremely bare in terms of staging. Funny switch up, we walked into the room when it looked like this, and then realized that the runway was just covered, and after the tech guys were finished removing the protective cover, it looked like this. Sending a very clear message that they are open and available for red carpet commissions. We were further surprised to see that it was a show composed almost entirely of suits with heavy patchwork. And patchwork is a major theme for Junya. I actually went back through his archive to see how much patchwork I could find on the runway. Mid-2010s is when patchwork becomes central to his men's work. And most importantly, if you go back exactly 19 shows, you will find a show that is almost identical to this one. We see that we have like red carpet runway, heavy use of patchwork, lots of Junya flavored formal wear. Also, look at this dude from the 2015 show. Like the face tat, the cast, like the whole deal with this guy is just great. In a lot of ways, the fit of these clothes even reflects that time from 10 years ago. 2015 was when most guys were still rocking cropped skinny jeans, and our suits were vacuum sealed, especially in the leg. We do have trendy, roomier pants in this new show, but the full skinny throwback did take me by surprise. There are, however, some noteworthy differences. Firstly, the 2015 show was primarily inspired by Congolese dandies, one of the most fascinating subcultures from the last century. And I think that inspiration is why Junya kept patchwork to a minimum at the time. Even as a central motif, the patchwork tends to be subtle. But this new show was just screaming patchwork. And even beyond literal patchwork, the idea of using extra cloth even came through with these more complicated denim pieces. Like this one seems like it's a denim jacket that's been made from 3 denim jackets. This is a denim trucker that's been conjoined to a tuxedo coat. Same move here, but a pretty different execution. Unlike his women's wear, which tends to be some of the most experimental work on the Paris calendar, Junya's men's collections are often literal proposals for his customers' closets. Waiting 10 years and then retooling a classic Junya show, to me, says that he likes this idea best. Like, if Junya was dressing us, this is what he would put us in. All right, now for something completely fucking different. Making our way across town, we approached the Parisian School of Pharmacy to attend the Walter van Beirendonck show, which was held in the Rose Garden out back. That was a lovely change-up. We don't usually get a lot of runway shows outside, even during the summer. And after dozens of runways in these cramped but beautiful buildings, going outside kind of felt like going to a different country. It was really nice. This show is about clowns. And for me personally, one of my favorite parts of watching a Walter van Beirendonck show is imagining that the clothes, pretty much the way that you see them on that runway, they are going to the store as product like that, and people will buy them. We're going to get into some details, but I do feel like we should address that the show's theme overall is a little on the nose, right? Like, why would the guy who's known for making really exaggerated, crazy clothes in bright colors, the huge jacket, like, why is this guy doing a clown show? I think I have figured out why. If you spend your career making clothes that look like this, some people, stupid people, are going to assume that you're like not serious in some way. Like they're going to ignore all of the content of what the clothes and the collections and the brand overall or the person of Walter van Beirendonck is actually saying, and they're just going to be like bright colors equals not serious. Walter isn't afraid of making jokes in his career, but calling him unserious is intellectually dishonest. I think that on some level, this show is him saying, clown clothes, huh? I'll show you some fucking clown clothes. And then he'll put those clown clothes up for sale, and again, people will buy them. Which in its way is kind of the best revenge against the haters, right? And he did at one point in the show get a literal kiss my ass moment. The smiley face clown face is on one of the boys' asses. So yeah, it's definitely clown clothes. Like I went to Clown Town and everyone knew this collection. Heavy polka dots, goofy plaids, the former commander in clown makes an appearance on one of the hats, and the smileys are used as a wider motif, not just on that one model's ass. I like personally that Walter continues to iterate on the muscle jackets. There's all these like gamma male influencer types on the internet trying to shrink their suits until they basically just have a spandex rayon blazer from the Liz Claiborne clearance rack. I think this is an attempt to be like, check it out, my muscles are so big, but you can't like see muscles through a suit. Unless you go to Walter van Beirendonck, in which case you will have such awesome muscles bulging through your suit. You'll honestly look a lot cooler this way too. The clown motif carried us through about half the show, and then we saw some great examples of what contemporary Walter van Beirendonck offers more broadly. These just huge pieces that even when you're looking at them on the runway, you're like, wait, how is this going to work on someone who's just walking around the city? And then you try it on at Dover Street Market, or you see someone wearing it around town, and you realize that Walter pieces, clown clothes and all, they really do look the best when they're out in the world on regular people. I can't wait to see this collection in that exact environment. Later on, in our first show with the brand, Sean Suen showed a really good collection. We're in the basement of the Palais de Tokyo, which at this point is the most familiar spot for runway shows for me personally. I've seen like 24 shows here. The first look is a little deceptive. It's pretty easy to overlook because it's doing the classic styling move of blazer, boring, complains about how tired it is, not very charismatic. But you flip those lapels up and suddenly, bold, carries a dark secret, fun! This styling trick is a little overused on runways, but to dismiss this formal wear proposal outright would be missing the point. Sean is pretty clearly trying to propose an alternative to the formal rubric that men are in right now. We've been in like this 10-year period where men have for the first time allowed themselves to experiment with what formal attire means. And instead of playing things more and more casual, Sean has gone the other direction in this show generally and commanded a few exceptional looks. The core elements are a solid, beautiful proposal for formal wear, right? So we have these few looks that make really good formal wear proposals for men. And, you know, if you take out some of the like more runway flair, like crazy stuff like this dragon on the floor, it's actually a really cool thing for a red carpet. But that doesn't account for the other looks in this show. And I'm ready to completely unlock these for you. They're really cool. To quote the show notes, throughout his life, Mr. Mei Lang Fong portrayed over 180 female characters. Off stage, he was a handsome and elegant man. On stage, he was a supremely beautiful woman. He was both the creator of beauty and its embodiment, end quote. I don't want to distract from Sean's good work, but we gotta emphasize, this is like the greatest fit that I've seen ever in my whole life. This is just, it's phenomenal. So cool. So with that awesome historic point in mind, Sean adapted this extravagant, beautifully over-the-top career into a set of clothes that, again, give us some great considerations for dressing up. And then actually one pretty casual idea as well. This is likely going to be a t-shirt that features what I assume is a photo of Mei Lang Fong upside down and smeared for copyright reasons. Honestly, it looks cooler like this. Very badass and looks great as a graphic with no context. Sean's product reflects what we've covered in this review, by the way. There's good formal wear and it's priced well. I really hope that he goes all the way with this new collection when it comes to putting product in stores. I want these to be for more than just the red carpet. Like this poncho shirt thing, truly great idea. Good season. I'm looking forward to getting more. Okay, Yohji Yamamoto time. This is our first time going to a Yohji men's show, and Yohji is one of those brands where the men's and the women's are radically different from each other, and I am not looking forward to being the only one who's not wearing all black. I'm going to ask a question here, and I'm curious if anyone has an answer in the comments. At what point are you able to do justice to a Yohji Yamamoto show as a fashion critic? I mean, I think we can all agree that looking at photos at home is great, but it can't reveal everything. So what's next? You go to the show, right? Okay, check and check, we got that. But I and most Yohji fans know that that isn't really enough. Most looks are doing so much that you can't get all the nuances just by watching the show in person or online. So the next step is you go to the showroom where every piece is on display, so you can look closely at what you've seen. And that's fine, but really, the clothes are meant to talk to you personally. You can't have that conversation no matter how closely you look at them. So you try everything on, and then you finally understand maybe? It's more than likely not the case. You can't just throw on a Yohji jacket and suddenly understand it. You have to live some life with the jacket. And honestly, if that last statement sounds like a stretch, there are a few well-documented cases that back that up. The most well-known being Notebooks on Cities and Clothes, the Yohji documentary, the first one. But yeah, for the guys who love pour homme, the dudes that want this to be part of their life, they often never find anything that's comparable at other brands. Like, once you cozy up to Yohji's design language, you just want to nest there forever. Let's look at how. If you are aware of and like Yohji, but don't keep up with his work, you may be surprised at how graphic heavy this show is. Beyond the fact that much of his most legendary archive product pieces are graphic heavy, we know most Yohji's menswear foundations are in suiting with a tasteful, artful twist. This could be why the show is divided up the way that it is, in multiple parts with different songs. We have the more eye-catching work to lead the show, and then the very parsed down looks further in. As we said, this show and pretty much every Yohji men's show is chock full of details. We have little details that are for aesthetics, like this extra pattern piece near the neck, an asymmetrical button down with trompe-l'oeil perforation effect. We have trousers that are styled over other trousers. We have an asymmetric vest that honestly looks insanely cool. We have an asymmetric button-down collar and long fabric tapes that you can button down wherever you happen to have a button, which is lots of places. So I like all those details, but outside of these quiet visual choices, there are some fantastic ideas that go past aesthetics and are new practical details. This coat has some flaps that can be buttoned up so that you can keep your coat buttoned and put your hands in your pants pocket. There's actually a lot of open flap details in the show overall, and not all of them are meant to be practical. Here in the back of this blazer, the flaps surely don't serve a specific purpose, but they do remind me of those protective canvases that like construction sites use. The wind will take them out if they don't perforate them with those holes. We also had this blazer that appears to be only half there, until the model turns and we see that the rest of the jacket is just dangling down. The ultralight material helps to make this visually beautiful. This seems like a less utilitarian and more poetic version of the harness straps that Helmut Lang would put in his jackets if you wanted to shed a layer when you got too hot. There are a million details like this, some of which serve a purpose. Those buttons at the bottom of this jacket, what do those do? I can't say what it is without thoroughly inspecting that specific piece. And that's kind of what I meant earlier when I said that there's no way for me to get close enough for this review to be sufficient. I'm reminded of this Buddhist expression that talks about enlightenment where they say, their words are fingers pointing to the moon. If you watch the fingers, you can't see the moon. I am not teaching anything that is nearly that important, and Yohji Yamamoto is not enlightenment, but this expresses the problem well. Their words are fingers pointing to the moon. If you watch the fingers, you can't see the moon. So, my solution to the how to review a Yohji Yamamoto runway show problem is to spark your curiosity, hopefully. You need to go touch and feel and try on the clothes by the man. Even if you can't build a full relationship with those clothes yet, I encourage you to at least go in person and make their acquaintance. Welcome back to Undercover Men's. We have been absent for a few years. It's all been lookbooks for a few years, but we are finally back, which you may recognize from their greatest hits, the Evangelion collection, the Clockwork Orange collection, and the fucking Samurai show with like the arrows falling out of the sky and the ghost, and like the coolest clothes that I've ever seen in my life. I am so excited. I got into Undercover looking at their men's runway shows. I am beyond. Let's go see. I'm excited. Okay, I want to emphasize something real quick. After this Undercover show ended, Jun Takahashi made a post onto his Instagram story that said this. Quote, I have been doing runway shows for many years, and lately I've noticed that many people mistakenly see the show venue as just a place for photo ops. There are very few people who actually share what they thought or felt after watching this show. This is very sad. End quote. Okay, so with that in mind, I would like to direct this review to Takahashi-san, who I have had deep respect for most of my adult life. The menswear side of Undercover is an engine that runs on obsession. So much of what Undercover is about being obsessed with other people's art. I mean, hell, one time Jun made up a series of fictional rock bands and then did a tribute runway show to those rock bands. Actually, hang on. I have an old Undercover coat that is from spring 2015. It has a trompe-l'oeil effect of this big old cable knit sweater onto what is ultimately just a cotton coat. It's trompe-l'oeil because you see like these are fake, they're just fake buttons here, whereas it has real buttons right here. I have no idea where from, and I've been looking for years, but I know that somewhere there is a picture of Sid Vicious or somebody wearing that exact same cable knit sweater because Jun is so consistent with his reference points. Truly, nearly everything that Jun does is birthed from being a super fan. But being a super fan isn't enough, is it? I mean, the reality is that most people who we would describe as super fans in the modern world have homes that look like this. It's a sad, small life where someone thought that they were engaging deeply with their favorite thing, but have now found themselves in a colorful prison cell. But Jun has always taken a different approach. He somehow manages to go deeper. Like he gets so obsessed with something that he comes out on the other side with something. It's fashion collection. And when it's good, it is fully a tribute to a movie or band and simultaneously a fully original piece of art. This is the magnetism of Undercover. People like me who get so fully obsessed with media that they love, we look at Jun's work and we want this for ourselves. How can I turn this naturally occurring, inescapable obsession into something productive instead of just obsession itself? A friend of mine, the day we met, was wearing Undercover and I commented on it. He eventually told me that Undercover was like a religion for him. And he qualified saying like, not actually, but, it gives me that kind of feeling. He explained this while he was showing me his multiple Undercover tattoos. This show, Spring 25 Men's, it saw June allowing his obsession to fully bloom for a new musical artist. It's an Australian band called Glass Beams. They're a COVID project that actually has gotten pretty successful. They always wear these masks, which kind of adds to the mystique of everything. I was aware of them already, but I hadn't really listened to them, which is awesome because runway shows are an incredible place to hear loud, awesome music for the first time. The clothes, from what I can tell, are a tribute to the feeling evoked by Glass Beam's music, which I should say Undercover is fiercely loyal to. The PR representative for Undercover actually told us that in order to use footage from the show, we were required to also include Glass Beams' music over top of it. That was a request we unfortunately could not meet because it would copyright strike this entire video. I can, however, show you this clip where we passed by the venue as they were rehearsing and we got a little bit of that sound. But for how much June is obsessed with rock stars and the geniuses behind music generally, I think he has noticed that there's a changing landscape, both in masculinity and in guitar music, whether it be rock or any other genre. Things are a lot more fluid now. They're a lot more textural. Men embrace adornment now in a very unself-conscious way. And as is typical for Undercover, there's a brittle appearance to the fabrics. It's the kind of stuff that you might not care if it gets kind of dirty or washed out. The more wear and tear might make it look even better. But I do want to focus on one detail in particular, these pieces. For those of us who are legally blind without eyewear, these look like how I see people when I don't have my contacts in, an almost fully abstracted blob. I found these personally to be heartbreakingly beautiful. On this channel, I've regularly referred to Jun Takahashi as the master of graphics. He's one of the only designers that can put a graphic on clothes that I consistently like. Sometimes it's his own designs, but more often he lifts graphics from other artists legally and then treats them in just such a way to make them not only beautiful, but really unforgettable. This season, the highlight of the show was the treatment for these paintings by Robert Bosisio, whose figures are sometimes so obscured that, depending on your prescription, could qualify as abstract paintings. I wonder if this season, Jun looked up from his many obsessions and noticed that the landscapes with which he's so familiar were all changing. Masculinity, music, even the clothes that men want to wear. I personally love it when artists are brave enough to come out and show work that says, I don't know yet. Here, Jun says, I don't know yet, confidently. More moving, never stopping, barely sleeping. We return back to the Palais de Tokyo. Head Maynor is someone who's been on my mind for about 6 years at this point. He was on the bleeding edge of large silhouettes before it became the recent standard. Along with that rise in popularity of large shapes came this misconception that designing large clothes is easy because you never have to worry about fit or tailoring or, anything really, just make it big. When, of course, excellent fashion designers still have to have a reasoning and a design language that sees them through that process, wherever the conclusion ends up. Head Maynor is one such designer, and he has shared some brilliant insights with us about his process this time. So that was very beautiful, wonderful.
Thanks a lot.
The shapes were just a little bit different. Could you tell us kind of how specifically they were different and what led you to change?
The shape was less created by the cutting of the garment, but more like coming from the textile and how manipulating the textile in a way that will give you a new form. So that was the difference, and also this is why this collection doesn't scream necessarily proportion, but more like some kind of gestures towards it, like the cutting, the things that are reversed or distorted a bit, but with a very soft fabric.
So you were allowing the textiles to kind of guide you more than a drawing, or?
Yeah, usually I don't work with drawing. We work with the garment directly, with like old pieces or things we find or like old work I did in the past. And from there we move on. and then also working on the silhouette, and then compare just this kind of.
Do you have any particular textiles that work best for the shapes that you go for?
There is the cottons that has this metallic thread inside that gives them like being kind of fragile look, but still you can create a very light shape with that. And
is this the long coats that were closer to the body and kind of
it's
had
like
that
the
wave
look
to
with the big cuff, like with the button.
Gotcha.
And then there is a lot of kind of connecting two fabric together, like gluing in certain area that gives structure, and then leave the other part of the garment fluid, light.
Wearing large clothes yourself, wearing your own designs, do you find that kind of changes the way that you move around in the world and interact with objects?
Yeah, I think so. I think the space between the clothes and the body, it's in a way like also kind of a mental space, creates this kind of mental space as well. But it depends, it can be something that is actually also the opposite, but there is something that is wearing something that is kind of covering you, or like wearing another type of body, or like wearing something that is sculpted.
You've worked with large silhouettes for so long at this point. Do you find that there is a limit to the size of a silhouette, or is it like as long as the pattern is right, you can just keep going?
To be honest, it was never really about creating a big clothes. It's not the aim. It was more the sculptural aspect of it. So you can take it to also we did very like a slim fit and very narrow, but still with this kind of sculpture touch or approach. So it's not about the big or how much you can grow. It's really about this idea of more sculpted kind of look, rather than, drapey or very light.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Weird exception here. Despite covering a handful of mainline Comme des Garçons shows, Daniela and I have not actually made it to an En Plus show before this season. This is the mainline Comme des Garçons for men. This is the only men's line that Ray is involved in. So excited, literally the first one. Like many of the recent Comme shows, it takes place in a big, old warehouse. And like every Comme show since the beginning of time, the staging is incredibly minimal, almost no frills at all. The shows have no flood, Ray doesn't come out at any point, and the attendant list is simple. Journalists on stage right, buyers on stage left. No celebrities, no influencers. Let's talk about it. The goal here is always to make something completely new. Clothes that have never been seen before. And we got a home run on that early on with these jackets that have these ruffled cutouts. A few of these seemed unwieldy in that maybe your arms couldn't sit at your side very comfortably, but honestly, a few of these are going to get a lot of wear from some Comme devotees. I've bought and worn some Homme Plus for years, and I've tried on a ton of Homme Plus. And while it always looks crazy on the runway, the product is both very similar to the runway prototypes and awesomely wearable. Especially from a customer perspective, these are a home run. There's almost never any foundational information to go off of for the meaning of any of the shows that Ray is attached to, but we at least know that with Homme Plus, these shows are meant to be conversations about suiting. These looks are helpful in that the pink areas show where the piece deviates from standard tailoring, which honestly looks like a pattern cutter was presenting the look to Ray, and then Ray said nothing, started ripping structural pieces or like linings out of the jacket and said, okay, now this works. Make it again with the loose bits in pink. If you allow yourself to stop paying attention during Comme des Garçons shows generally, you'll miss it when they switch things up on you really hard. This is about suits, but maybe it's using the perspective of suiting to make statements about menswear more broadly. And in the wider art conversation, when artists and designers are thinking about a topic, that often means that they are interrogating the topic or exposing the topic. And while Ray is absolutely capable of interrogating a topic, these seem to be a little bit looser. More like it's looking at suiting and menswear generally, then sort of letting its vision blur out of focus, kind of crossing its eyes at it a little bit and then seeing how things look like that. Continuing on this look in particular, all the Comme sub-labels as well as the main line have experimented with transparent clothes over the top of clothes for forever. If we made a list of recurring motifs, that would definitely be one of them. Still on the same look here, we have a lot of transparent layers all on top of each other. And this look in particular is not a suit. Like, even if we ignore the croc embossed sleeves and we ignore the pink, I think this is closer to a trench coat stacked on top of some other kind of outerwear for men. The statements that are being made about outerwear's relationship to suiting are getting kind of jumbled and forced together. And then somewhere along the line of designing this collection, it feels like they just started stuffing ideas into netted fabric, sewing up the seams, and putting a lapel on it. Like, the way in which the CDG studio operates with Ray, the designer, to an outsider at least, just seems like a maddening process. I could not possibly explain that process to you in the time frame that we have for this segment, but we recently made a nearly hour-long video just about that process as it relates to one of the best shows that they ever put on. You should watch that, but not right now. You should watch it later. The quickest, dirtiest summary is that Ray kind of created in her studio a human version of like Midjourney, that weird AI large language model thing where you like type in prompts and then it like sort of approximates an image based on your prompt. Except in Ray's human version, it's the kind of process that does serve the Comme des Garçons purpose of wanting to create completely original things because this process is so unbelievably bonkers. But it is also the type of process that would probably at some point make a regular person in that studio just say, fuck it, and then just like throw something together in this kind of way. Ray reminds us all the time that her work has a lot to do with being angry. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a welcome reaction in the studio. This one in particular reminds me of those projects where someone resolves to carry all of the trash that they produce for a week around like as clothing or something. There is more in this show than I can possibly cover in a segment for this video, and there kind of always is. If you're interested in Ray's work, I only want to remind you that you do not need someone to come in and tell you what it's about. This work does reward a closer examination, and there are things to talk about, but this work does stand alone in that you do not need any context to do the looking yourself. More than any other brand that's ever existed, you can have a full experience with these clothes and collections just by turning your phone off, putting the show up on the big screen, and quietly watching it alone. Speaking of which, if this video is not up on your big screen, you are fucking up. I mean, Daniela really, she crushed the cinema. I mean, do you know how long this took? Just this? It took a long time. Folks, welcome to the midway point of the Paris Fashion Week mega video. This is the lightning round, where the fashion is fast and the lightning is faster.
The fashion is fast implies that we are talking.
Oh my gosh, no, oh my gosh. Junya presented a collection that tried to combine demi-couture with workwear. Huge shoulders should come as no surprise from Junya. They have always commanded a massive silhouette. And these mermaid skirts are quite eye-catching. A$AP Rocky did a secret runway show that was absolutely chock full of celebrities. The show was this mashup between like archival Raf Simons and the new DIY one-of-one culture that's grown up through Instagram in recent years. Getting in was very difficult, but it was a fascinating experience to have. 8 on 8 is CSM graduate Li Gong's whimsical yet approachable brand, known for their super popular Asics collaborations. Their whimsy continues with bunny tail trousers and leather shorts, as well as flats for men, some of which feature these googly eyes. Charles de Vilmorin put a second couture show on that was heavy on the character building, finding hypothetical humans and reveling in their personalities and quirks. Also a big old Donnie Darko reference, which is always welcome with me. Vowels is a Japanese streetwear brand that usually obsesses over basics, but this season branched out with riskier items like a repeat print of their logo. I was hoping that Vowels would bring part of their massive research library with them, but alas, that is only at the New York store. Okay, so I know we talked about Nicola Di Felice's JPG in this video already, but the Corrèze showroom was full of ultra-wearable, precise, and minimal clothing. This time for men too. I was shocked at how good this style in particular looked on a dude. It looked great. I am so stoked to see what the next women's show holds. And Acne Studios continues to develop a distinctive voice for themselves while sitting on the front end of fashion people trend, which is different from regular people trend. This is like the look that fashion people who are ultra trendy want right now. There was a number of items in the showroom that stuck out and actually seemed like a tasteful way to wear something that's super wacky and fun. I liked this collection. That is it for the lightning round. Closing statement of some kind. Currently heading across town to Color. This is Junichi Abe, who is the husband of Chitose Abe of Sacai. Truly, like, fashion Japanese power couple. Color only shows on the menswear calendar. We've only seen one show by them before. I'm still kind of learning what the design language of Junichi actually is, so this will be a pay close attention type show for me.
Bliss, your seat is DA44.
DA44.
And Daniela, DA45.
Yep, I think we've got him. Thank you so much.
As we moved towards our seats, it started to rain a little bit, so they passed out rain ponchos for everyone. Hell yeah, brother. Once the show started, I was jealous of the much chicer looking rain gear with its little peppering of perforations for breathability. But okay, I do think I better understand Color's design language after this show. There's a part of clothing design that rarely gets discussed. Cloth is two-dimensional. Like, I realize that nothing in real life is actually two-dimensional, but bear with me. Two-dimensional, and then in order to create clothing, you have to turn that two-dimensional object into a 3D shape. This process should fascinate any fashion designer, but Junichi Abe of Color seems to think about it a lot. He's in his 20th year of business, and it seems that he is kind of settled on what he truly cares about for his collections. All throughout this show are references to suiting canvas and the pad stitching that comes with it. I promise to keep this brief, but 2D, 3D for a garment. You still with me? You know how really nice men's suits just kind of seem to pop more? It's hard to put your finger on it, but they just look more structured somehow. A lot of this has to do with canvassing and pad stitching. Most suits, honestly, they're just glued together, and there is nothing that's actually controlling the shape, and that's why they're so floppy and awful looking a lot of the time. But the ones that have mostly been made by hand involve this really intricate network of pad stitching and canvas that allow the garment to stay in a certain shape. That's how you get these big, beautiful lapel rolls that look like ocean waves. They aren't just like this when you buy them. They stay like this pretty much indefinitely. It's obviously more complicated than this, but we're trying to keep things relevant here. So we see pad stitching and exposed canvas throughout the show in different looks. So what should be a hidden interior element of the garment is now an exterior adornment, which is just deconstruction, right? Additionally, Abe seems to have added little laminated instructions or notes on some pieces. I can't make out what they actually say for these, but we do have some text on this bag where it gives, info about manufacturing processes and stuff. I think that all of these are supposed to be used in the same way that the writing on those old bunny boots functions. It's technically instructional info for the wearer, but it comes off as this kind of ominous, mysterious message from the designer. These types of details often feel very ghostly. Menswear is very fond of this kind of stuff. Both of these details can be seen in Abe's wider body of work at Color, both the exposed canvas and pad stitching as well as those laminated instructional things. He's done this for years. I think Abe likes the idea of a casual garment that's meant to be a fun, sporty part of the wardrobe being infused with the kind of purpose and care that's given to bespoke suits. After a while, the stern connotation of the canvas and the pad stitches as a metaphor maybe kind of faded into Abe just having this simple affection for their look. And now it's consistently part of his work. So I don't know if we need to take this to some literal metaphoric way because he's used it in his work for so long at this point. He would not have used it this many times if he didn't just, like how it looked. And it's true, it's beautiful. Especially if you're into bespoke suits, we really freak out about this kind of stuff. But yeah, if you're looking for more deconstruction detailing here, you're in luck. This blazer has butterfly lining on the outside. Here, the classic trench coat's asymmetrical storm flap becomes the top of a flap pocket, which is such a natural melding that when you look at it, it's hasn't it always been I had to go check, aren't trench coats always like this? And it turns out they're not. There are a lot of deconstructive details in this show. And importantly, it's not just for show. On the most noticeable level, canvas and pad stitches add some great weight. This coat has it all the way down the front, and the look of this, very noticeable. Garments tend to look better in motion when they are heavier. Now, on the less practical side, we do have some deconstruction details details that are so widely used that they're almost like mainstream, like the shirt on shirt move. But to me, the coolest thing about the way that Abe uses deconstruction in this show is that he remembers what deconstruction ultimately is for. Collections often fall flat when they just use deconstruction to challenge clothing norms, and that's kind of it. Deconstruction exists, at least to me, to try new possibilities that would normally never get tried by a traditional tailor. And then seeing if those new configurations can offer us a brand new, quirky, but very practical solution. Abe certainly understands what makes deconstruction a beautiful aesthetic exercise, but there's practical ideas that have been tried here that I love, and I would love to take for a test run. These pockets, for example, really seem like they actually would be a good way to carry an enormous number of things if you need those things to not move around on you and you don't want to use a bag. I've seen tops that have big pockets on them. Never seen this idea tried before. This looks great. We hurried across town. We are literally always hurrying. We hurried across town to the Kids Super Show, which was held at a massive theater and to which we had backstage access prior to the event itself. Colum Delane, fashion's broadest multi-hyphenate, is hell-bent on creating the most entertaining runway shows possible. When I interviewed Colum a couple of years ago, he actually talked shit about runway shows in this specific way.
Then I went to 2 fashion shows in Milan, which were the first time I ever went to fashion shows, and I sat there and I was like, this is the worst thing ever. I want to participate.
Oh, come on.
And he's kept to it. I often refer to Colum as fashion's avatar of chaos. He's the embodiment of the saying, while they decide what to make of you, ignore them and make more work. Kids Super puts on 2 shows a year, and every one has to be noticeably different and usually involves a different art form as its backdrop. So this show features a bunch of folks from Cirque du Soleil doing Cirque du Soleil stuff and was themed after marionettes, the puppetry arts. Backstage, styling was being done by Wisdom K.
Maybe not that dramatic.
I mean, it does feel like his outfits really do have like a Wisdom K like about them. Like the editing that he does in his reels, I think is pretty true to life. Like I've been around the dude a lot. It really is like that. Except for his general demeanor, which is very warm and like chill. Colum and Wisdom were trying to solve a last minute problem backstage. So when the models walk out onto the stage, they are being followed by a big old hand above them while they walk.
Well, initially we had strings going to the hands and the feet. So the biggest problem was when they would walk, the strings getting caught, and then, some of the detail, getting covered up by the strings, even though they're thin.
During rehearsals, Colum noticed that most of the models were having a hard time walking and maintaining this kind of like marionette action thing. Most of them would do it for a little bit, and then they would kind of just default to the thriller and then just walk the rest of the show like that. And he was like, we are not going to have like a big long line of thriller. He and Wisdom hashed this out and eventually found a good solution. But man, when it was showtime, this model had no fucking problem with that execution, bro. Like locked fully in, hit him with a pow. Alton Mason really fucked that up. That was so cool. As far as the clothes are concerned, this collection, much like the last one, is trying to kind of open up the Kids Super palette a little bit. The core of the runway shows is casual suiting with Colum's original artwork on it. I've always liked his paintings, and I've always liked how Colum chooses to show those images on clothes. The placement and the treatment for such literal graphics is often difficult to do. Experientially, these shows are absolutely wild to be at. Kind of nice. Woke up this morning in a good mood, and Sacai is walkable from our Airbnb. I know we gush a whole lot about how much we like Sacai, but they really have earned the spot of the unignorable brand that shows 4 times a year. It never feels hurried, it never feels rushed, it never feels like, oh, this wasn't fully finished. They're just a massive ideas factory as a brand. It's really impressive. Sacai is a very sincere brand, but in a particular way. They make youthful clothes for everyone, and those clothes look great and very natural no matter how old you are. This direction towards youth isn't necessarily a purposeful decision from Chitose Abe, the GOAT, because I would say that her goal is much more meaningful. As a result of her staple hybridization and mixing of different design elements from different clothing genres, what she ends up doing is she gives older people access to styles that they wouldn't be able to get at their more age-appropriate brand of choice, like, whatever age appropriate means. I mean, in reality, the idea that we do have separate brands for different age groups has been established for a long time, but I hope that viewers of this channel understand that you can wear whatever the fuck you want whenever you want. You are not a demographic. But what Sacai does is provide their younger cult following with stylish go-tos, like think bomber jackets and t-shirts, while also blending in and introducing them to classic garments like cotton poplin button-downs, wool skirts, tailoring elements in a super approachable and encouraging way. But what that also ends up creating is a way for older people to engage with the conventional ideas of, quote, dressing younger for people who may feel somewhat self-conscious adopting a more carefree and youthful style after many years of not doing that. At times, Abe finds common ground between both generations and pushes her customers to see beyond your comfort horizons. Like, for example, putting a drawstring on a pleated skirt. First of all, I bet Sacai has absolutely done this before. And it's a good way of thinking about this because it could be both the sporty option that your mom tries out, or it's the sophisticated new skirt that elevates her daughter's wardrobe, or the extremely badass skirt that her awesome son wears. But because Sacai is still Sacai, a pleated drawstring skirt translates their ethos into an ultra-streamlined product option for a customer. But what really speaks to Sacai is taking that drawstring and making a giant knit made out of toggles and knots. It's just how the ideas that Chitose is working with ultimately express themselves outwardly. Everything Sacai is very reasonably wearable, yet also absolutely bonkers. And that's pretty helpful when you see the multiple shoulder offerings on women's dresses and jackets that are very wearable, but rather extreme proposals for someone who is just looking for a cotton poplin dress. Considering that this is technically a men's show, the men got a pretty remarkable shoulder in this top that I cannot wait to see a lot of men wearing next Fashion Week. These giant trouser pockets for men and women create a new way to look at something that is, at the end of the day, pretty standard. There's something about this brand that makes it feel like it's everything to everyone at the same time. Chitose Abe has always managed to find her way into pushing customers out of their usual comfort zone, kind of encouraging what she calls self-discovery. And that is not just talk. How Abe chooses to splice up these garments is clearly geared towards creating opportunities for a customer to choose something they wouldn't have thought was them. She's creating the perfect environment for someone to find a familiar comfort in their standard favorites. And then on top of that, Abe gives them so much more substance and experimentation in that same garment. And what I love about this season is that we're even challenging some conventions of fabric choice. Like this stiff t-shirt and stiff hoodie create a pretty intense contrast with this denim jumpsuit with this kind of sluggishly beautiful movement. And because of all these considerations that we've listed out here very quickly, I know I talk fast, I can't say which one comes first, but Abe ends up creating a unique look while successfully creating a vehicle to drive everyday people into dressing better. Okay, so moving into themes, there are certain touchstones in this collection that help me piece the main theme together. James Dean, the American icon, is the foundational basis for this show. In case you are somehow not aware, this is James Dean. You're probably familiar with him because of how perfectly preserved his legacy is, what with dying tragically young and representing angsty teen rebellion that resonated deeply with his culture at the time. Ms. Abe was inspired by this youthful energy, but doesn't intend to use it to be condescending. Rather, the opposite. For example, this photograph of James Dean was used to inspire this very open set. There are reproductions of Dean's iconic Harrington jacket in this show with a bit of Sacai flair to them too. But the spirit here is that youth is not a state of being, but rather a state of mind that encourages you to branch out and discover what's really out there. Like, you know, how everyone used to be before they became burdened with the monotony of adulthood. Chitose Abe has been designing clothes for a long time, and still has a lot of new ideas and a lot of places to go. Maybe she is advocating for the customer, as well as herself, that having a childlike mind will always lead to new and fulfilling places. I mean, it is certainly working for her. Moving on. We then approached the Ziggy Chen Tower, where we must fight his acolytes before we ascend to the top of the tower and must face Ziggy and his powerful AoE attacks. JK, considering how video game-esque his clothes appear, Ziggy, the man, is actually just a smiley, friendly dude. He's one of a couple different designers in the present that are trying to strike an extremely difficult balance in menswear, which is make suits casual. Most modern attempts to make suits casual honestly suck. It's like they'll just do stuff like make it extremely bright colors or make it way too big, and it just... Like, I'm not wearing that every day. The problem with proposals like that is that, similar to just a plain old suit, you still look like a complete weirdo going to Buffalo Wild Wings with your more sports-inclined friends. Ziggy takes a different and I think more realistic approach. You make the materials comfortable so that you like wearing them, and you just make all the suits look a little bit weathered and worn out so that they look both beautiful and also no one thinks that you're heading to work. When I look at Ziggy's clothes personally, I think of them as the spiritual successor to Hussein Chalayan's brilliant graduate collection at CSM, where he buried the collection in the ground and then added some copper fillings so that it would stain and kind of eat through the clothes a little bit. Ziggy has never cited Chalayan that I know of, but this feels like a good way to get a Ziggy newcomer kind of caught up to speed. The final result is clothes that are brand new, but they have the appeal of weathered vintage clothes. And this collection, again, proves his point. I mean, this guy is in a blazer, matching dress pants, and a button-down, and he looks like he could just hang out at a barbecue or run to the grocery store, and it does not feel forced or out of place at all. There's some great examples in this show of kind of what sets Mr. Chen apart from other designers in this same aesthetic. He often ventures way off the shore for his finishing details. Like, if I go to Closet Case, La Claire, Inc., Atelier New York, The Library, Darklands, anywhere, I could find you a few muddy colored button-down shirts by a few different brands. But I don't think that this shirt in particular exists anywhere else with this draping detail. Or this mid-layer shirt that isn't shaped like anything else that I've seen in menswear. Ziggy also brings some of his classic motifs like double-breasted blazers where the double part is very, very close together. This is a very Tim Burton type move. Ultimately, I think these are meant to be clothes that you kind of take with you throughout your life. They're not special occasion clothes for a club, clothes for a performance, or clothes for a photo shoot. These are clothes that help elevate your everyday life. It's the kind of stuff that you can throw on even when you're working from home all day just because they are comfy clothes. Just because they make you feel more like yourself. Okay, it is actually hot now in Paris, and we are walking up to Doublet, which I've recently learned does not use the hard T sound at the end. It's not doublet, it's Doublet. Generally, I know Doublet to be a pretty whimsical, kind of almost comical brand where they have really good ideas for clothes and accessories, but it's all presented in this extremely goofy, ironic way. So I kind of have no idea what we're actually getting into here. This will be really interesting. You may recognize this location as the same one where Doublet hosted their summer heatwave snowstorm presentation. Okay, so this show, the one here, is all about idols, your Oshi. The runway setup here was pretty awesome. It was a bunch of the custom banners that superfans bring to events to get their Oshi's attention. We actually experienced this at the Dior show a while back. Daniela filmed some folks who had dutifully lined up hours before their fave was coming to attend the show so that they could be at the very front and get their attention for a few seconds. So the banners were like barriers for the runway show, held up by Doublet team members, and the show begins. The best way that I have found to cover Doublet shows is to literally just go through the references because most of them are little jokes and puns and stuff, so just running down the list. The first few looks played with tinsel, like the Christmas stuff. And that's hilarious because no one actually likes tinsel. Okay. It's actually going to be kind of hard just to go through the list without contextualizing this a little bit. We do need to talk about Doublet as an idea. Let's back up. The number one way that I have summarized Doublet for newcomers who just aren't aware of what the brand is that a long time ago they put out this t-shirt with a lot of just big embroidery all over it and a big graphic that says in huge letters, it's not birthday today. I always forget, like, because it's not my birthday. It's not birthday today. It's just a casual t-shirt that you can throw on 364 days a year. Again, that t-shirt is not part of this collection, but it is so descriptive of what they do as a brand. It's all irony, but it's not this like biting, cynical, angry irony of like Balenciaga. Every time I've spoken to the creative director through a translator, he has always said something sort of like, I hope people like this collection and I hope it makes people happy. A lot of it is just meant to be wholesome jokes. And to a certain modern, extremely online sensibility, this feels wholesome and precious, which leads to the official Doublet tagline, strangest comfort. That is such a great tagline in English. Beautiful. So it honestly is very funny to me when they put a proposal like, what if tinsel was a handbag? And it's like, oh, Doublet, I don't want to touch that stuff all the time. That's a bad idea for a bag. I love you so much. What a great idea for a bag. And also it's pom-poms because of the cheerleader association, because it's like, Yohji. We all clear? Let's bust out those details. We got jeans that have a trompe-l'oeil effect of cowboy chaps on them. We have a jersey made of a jersey. Like it's supposed to be a soccer jersey, but you zoom in and instead of moisture-wicking polyester, the piece is made of jersey woven cotton. A jersey, if you will. How do we get the Newark Bears involved in this? Spyber is a technology textile company that Doublet is collaborating with for this collection. They pay further tribute to Spyber with this look, which features a spider. It's just that, like, for a guy who needs a translator for interviews, there are a lot of English language puns in this brand. Here's a knee slapper. These sweatpants are a joke about jeans. You got the golden contrast stitching, the deep dark indigo dye, and even some beautiful weathering on the cotton. The joke is that 100% cotton sweatpants are supposed to be looking at 100% cotton jeans and saying, we're not so different, you and I. This look is meant to be like a play on the ultra utility garments made famous by brands like Helmut Lang and more recently by brands like Acronym. Here, it's just screaming more function and transforms the simple straps into fully useless, cumbersome chest rigs. We also have some hilarious branding spoofs on Levi's, OnlyFans, and Gore-Tex. And besides all the literal jokes, we got extremely beefy pants with this zigzag zipper up the front, and we got spiked Converse, which I might wear Converse for the first time. They kind of look cool if you put spikes on them. And there's just a ton more here that we don't have time for in this review. If any of this resonates with you, please go look at Doublet's runways or just the product in any store closely. It is like playing a crossword puzzle. Finding all the little references is extremely fun. I am extremely excited. We have attended other Thom Browne Pret-a-Porter shows. We've attended Thom Browne menswear shows, but we have not attended a couture show yet. I feel like this format, couture, is what Thom was born to do. I assume that this is going to have something to do with the Olympics, but the real priority at Thom is always the technique, and especially since it's a couture show, it's going to be ultra heavy technique. So we'll have to see how that actually shakes out, but I am definitely predicting heavy Olympics. Oh, actually, hang on. I'm gonna go get my, wait a second. Boom. I love these boxes. Thom Browne boxes are really cool.
Right?
Yep. Oh, we're here. So everyone invited to the new Thom Browne show received a coat that was made of untreated muslin, which is the same kind of coat that's worn in couture ateliers, and it featured everyone's name calligraphied onto it. Same with the chairs as well, which I unfortunately didn't get footage of. Okay, I would like to tell you about my very first Thom Browne show experience for a moment. It was during Men's Week in Paris. It was hot as hell during the summer, and I was exiting with a group of people after the show had completed. There was a woman next to me wearing a stunningly beautiful Thom Browne coat. She was a feisty older New York lady. It was this white jacquard coat with these beautiful details embroidered just all over it. There was like a landscape at one point, just absolutely beautiful coat. And I turned to her, I was like, ma'am, you are by far the best dressed person at this show. You look fantastic in that coat. And she looked up at me and she was like, listen to me, young man. I bought this Thom Browne coat with my money, and I look around at this show and I wonder if other people bought theirs. And I was like, yes, ma'am, tell them about it. There is like this special relationship that exists between the serious committed customers of a brand and the brand itself. Brands appreciate everybody that gives them money, but I think there is this special relationship between the designer and clients who really are passionate about the advanced stuff. Surprisingly, despite the heavy Olympic connotation, the Thom Browne show notes do not start with sport, but talking about their clients. Quote, "The toile as the source text, the toile as the final garment. The work in progress becomes the final work. Couture begins with the silhouette in muslin. While collections are historically shown in a complete state, the couturier and the client ultimately return to the source text, the toile." End quote. Thom Browne has always loved sport. Thom competitively played tennis as a kid. He swam for Notre Dame. The Thom Browne Company has focused on sports like their Thanksgiving Celebrity Touch football. There was another Olympics-themed show that heavily featured Olympic skier Lindsey Vonn. There was this other show that was also extremely Olympics-themed. Like, this is not a fun idea for a show because the Olympics are coming up in France. Thom Browne himself is actually just obsessed with sports. The show opens with a group of male models lining the runway holding a massive rope. This was somewhat to discourage people from stepping onto the runway and making it dirty with their shoes from outside. But when we were seated, they did this little tug-of-war demonstration. Thom Couture shows always start by featuring one of his hero items, the shrunken skirt suit proposal. Tug-of-war was actually considered an Olympic sport until 1920. It's also the sport that we know has ancient roots, but we know very little about how it actually began. So thematically, we just kind of start with the ultra-generic sport, teams physically struggling recreationally. We move on, and then just a ton of gorgeous looks come out. At the end, we get 3 looks that are kind of meant to be the gold, silver, and bronze medals as gorgeous jackets. Strangely enough, in this color with this jacket, I actually like the bronze one the best. Olympics and sports, baby, let's go. But okay, I think that from that supercut a little bit ago, you can plainly see that we could talk about what Thom is doing with technique for a really long time. We actually did that recently in an episode where we talked about Thom Browne's first couture show, which you should watch later. Watch it later. Keep watching this. But I do want to talk about why the collection is leaning in this direction. Thom Browne has reached something of a milestone in his career. He founded the business in 2001. He, along with a couple of other menswear designers, completely altered men's relationships with their clothes. And not just fashion guys, like everyone. Suits got tighter, and it is no mystery who made that happen. As Thom got more theatrical in his runway shows and then maybe a little more surreal, it became clear that he wanted to join the Mount Olympus of fashion design. He wanted to make haute couture. He did. And now he's doing it again. He's no longer brand new to the final stage of fashion design. He's just one of the competitors now. And in haute couture, pardon the pun, it is an honor just to compete. The French government literally has to approve you to just show during this fashion week. And I don't know, this is maybe a little bit overly personal, but I am also a business owner, albeit an extremely much smaller scale than Thom Browne is. But I do know that this shit is scary. Running a company is really, really scary. You're, at best, working too hard and constantly blaming yourself for everything, and at worst, it can get pretty nasty. Thom Browne has reached a milestone that I feel like he has been wanting for multiple decades, and he's there, and he's securely there. And as someone who is in a position of always being stressed about the company, always constantly looking at that, always working too hard, it is encouraging to look at someone and not just see them at that stage and be like, wow, they really did it. Look at him just go. This stuff is beautiful. It's heartbreakingly beautiful. And I think maybe that's why there is so much deconstruction in these beautiful looks. It's not added to bring this like air of brooding fashion coolness. I think it might just be Thom and his atelier team basking in the work that they finally get to do full steam. Congrats. I mean it. Thom and Andrew are always affectionate in public, which is great to see, but this kiss in particular must have been pretty special. Good morning, new day, walking up to Givenchy. We're still waiting on a new CD, but in the meantime, the studio collections have been good. Like, I've actually really liked them. They've told us that these are kind of an opportunity for the house to sort of return to the roots of what Hubert did. I've sort of thought of these collections as my continuing education in fashion history because it's able to link the past to the present in a really effective way. Also, the people at Givenchy are incredibly cool, so it's always fun to see them. Interesting to note, we got to go to a different location for Givenchy this time. Rather than going to their headquarters on Avenue Georges V, a street noteworthy for its many couture ateliers, we went to this location, which is on Avenue Montaigne, a place that's known for its shopping. Givenchy uses this location as a showroom, and spoiler, it's super pretty. I mean, like, look at this view. The team here is also always incredibly generous with their time. They really go out of their way to give us the best insights possible so that we can then in turn bring them to you all. What I think Givenchy does best as a house is interpret the glamorous, kind of out of reach feelings that are associated with Parisian haute couture. Then it distills them into modern, wearable, sophisticated clothes. I mean, there was more on offer than just men's, but oh boy, the men's was so impressive. This is some version of a motorcycle jacket, but done up in a pony hair. This is a denim jacket with a Duchesse satin collar, and it completely works. Loved this one. They've managed to find a way to use heritage prints from Hubert's era, and the studio team seems to be fond of this print in particular, which Mr. Givenchy drew himself. It is never an easy task trying to make old prints new again, but the design team has just been executing this really well for a few seasons, actually. And as is always the case with Givenchy, the construction of these clothes is airtight, and the finishings are beautiful. Feathers, jacquards, python, silk satin, no corners are cut. Givenchy is a great way to look at what a possible future could be in fashion generally. There's been discourse the last few months around whether or not the creative director model is still working, or if it's a relic of the Galliano and McQueen era of fashion, which it's important to know that both of those men have had stints designing for this house specifically. If anyone is going to abandon the creative director model, I really don't think it would be Givenchy, but right now, whether or not we ever get a new creative director at Givenchy, there is nothing to be upset about in these results. The studio team can handle this. But while public anticipation builds for their future commander in couture, we all get to enjoy a very necessary reminder that at its core, fashion is a team effort. As long as you have a solid foundation, you can do anything. Okay, I'm pretty excited about this section. There are very few young, independent footwear designers because of infrastructure challenges. Just put overly simply, the resources that are necessary to make shoes tend to be much greater than the resources necessary to make clothes. There's a few designers that are just doing it anyway, but we wanted to get to know one in particular. So we headed over to the Dover Street Market showroom, the single best showroom in Paris, to speak with them.
So I'm Phileo, I'm 22 years old, and I design shoes. I always start with the volume and the idea of volume, and so this time it was like, let's get as less volume as possible and then as much as possible. So like, this is like pierced by hand and then stitched by hand twice. Then painted also, like the upper is fully painted, and it's not like a brown leather, so it gets like much deeper tone, which I think is very good. Also, all the outs are made in nubuck. So because I didn't want it to have like what is it called, the rubber pads, which I think looks awful. So when it was something that gripped a bit.
And you said that these ones down here are barefoot shoes. They're zero drop.
Zero, like
wow,
like flat. Yeah.
I feel like that's very. Oh my gosh, that is completely zero.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are. Yeah. Do they qualify as ballet flats? I don't know if it technically is in that category.
Technically, it isn't. But like the idea is a ballet flat, but it isn't.
Tell me about these guys.
Yeah. So these are like raffia flowers. They're all made by hand in Portugal. So.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, it's actually quite fun. And it was, I don't know, I wanted something a bit more light, not in terms of like weight because it's not light, but in terms of like the visual, and have something maybe a bit more poetic and less like rough and intense and stuff this season. So. Yeah, really also wanted to have like kind of a huge sole, and really wanted to have like everything huge because like at first like Fair was like let's do the heel a bit smaller to be like lighter because this is like 1.1 kilo, so it's like
wow, yeah.
The heel is 4 centimeter.
Okay.
Yeah, and 2 centimeters like here.
Tell me why you've gone with this very wide outsole.
Whenever you look at it like that way, it doesn't look that huge. Then you kind of change the proportions and how you look at it from depending on the angle you have.
I understand. Yeah.
And this is quite interesting. Like I have a few ceramics at home that I really love, and the idea is always to have like, as long as you turn it, you will never see it the same. And I think it's like amazing to kind of try to have that idea while keeping it like quite simple and also very wearable at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It still is a monk shoe, but you can wear it with the shroud or without.
Quadruple monk strap.
Yeah, kind of. And like we reused the last that we used for the rock show last season because we did a shoe for rock. And so we reused this last and just made it with like this kind of this awesome leather that is like shredded. I really love. And also asymmetric. Pretty much asymmetry every time. And it was like also like the zigzag stitch, both sides, and yeah, the 4.
This is awesome, man.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we are a little bit off the beaten path in Paris. We are going up to one of my personal faves, Janja and Vanessa, Belgian designer. Hello.
Hey, nice to see you again.
I think this season we're going to try something a little bit different with Janja since we have interviewed him so many times. We're going to focus a little bit more on the specific pieces and the details of what actually makes them great.
So this season we did quite a deep research on fabrics. Most of them come from Japan because we're getting really quite into a deeper layer of like amazing makers and like also fabric designers who do treatments on like classic things, and like there's like layers and layers. I even thought I couldn't get deeper, but we're really like so yeah, this season all started a little bit with this guy.
I was hoping we could talk about that.
It's a pure linen double weave high twist jacquard motif because it has a kind of almost clownesque kind of aspect to it. It has a kind of humor in it that I'm not used to being attracted to. But it just, and then especially when I saw the fabric in a full roll, it's just magic. And yeah, so I built the whole color palette this season around this guy.
So these colors are from the factory, and then you thought this is so
beautiful. This is their design. This is not my design.
This is the core of the collection, at least the color.
Yeah. And for instance, this is another amazing fabric. The Sumi denim, so a yarn dyed Sumi denim. This is then after over dyed with natural isomate, like natural indigo, which gives it this black blue kind of hue that's quite intriguing, I think. And then the reverse part is like very bright, like bright and happy almost. So together with this check puzzle, yeah, I think that was the start.
Definitely. Now, when we're thread dyeing, is that something that affects the hand of the fabric at all, or is it just so that you can get a certain depth to the color?
It's more the depth. And of course, depending what you dye with, like if you dye with Sumi, like this is done. Sumi is on the fiber, not so much, it doesn't liquefy, it's still kind of like particles that stay on the fiber, but that's also why indigo and Sumi, they wash out over time. And then another one that I developed, that was developed for us, it's this guy. That's a really amazing example. So we went to this partner I have that we work with since 6 years in Japan. I had the whole palette actually ready. I had almost all my fabrics, but I was like, I miss two things. And I think I miss a rainproof fabric, but I'm not sure. And something clean hand. He went to the back of his office and he was like, this guy, and it just, I think it's an amazing fabric. It's pure cotton canvas, but it has this peachy kind of coated hand, which is deceiving. You would think there's a chemical thing on it. Okay. The only treatment that's done is a very slow, very long wash. And then it moves for 24 hours. It's like stays in motion in the water.
So he did a really intense wash to this and then coated it in the wax.
It's not coated.
Oh, no, not at all.
No. It feels like a coating, but it's just the wash.
The wash is what did this entirely.
The soft, slow movement.
Okay, so wait, can we bring the camera a little bit closer? And I'm just going to show what this sounds like. That does not feel like cotton, dude.
No.
Like, that's incredible.
And now we bumped into these, into a project, 7 Weaves it's called, and they this fabric comes from them. So what they do, it's a social project from Assam, which is East India, and they work with locally sourced Airei silk. Airei silk is a certain silk that's also called vegan silk sometimes, because the moth or the butterfly can get out of the cocoon without
being boiled.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they actually leave a hole. I think I've never seen the actual cocoon, but they leave a hole and they can fly out. So it's a project, and they gather different weavers from different villages in their region, and they produce fabrics with them. And it's all hand spun, hand woven, hand dyed with natural dye stuff from the forests around.
When you put it on, it does not feel like anything else. And I have another layer under it, and it's still, I can't describe it. It feels like the thing is breathing even when I'm standing completely still, like taking breaths. It's very weird.
It's like you're walking and like.
Yeah. And especially I would never wear an undershirt with this. It is very much meant to be against your skin. And it's 100% silk?
Yeah. So
I had to cut him off because there was just too much good info here for this segment to hold. If you want to hear more Yan explaining the nuances of even more of his work, we have the full Spring 2025 video on the Patreon, along with multiple other interviews by him and a ton of other awesome designers, ton of exclusive episodes, and exclusive Discord access. Go join it. I made my way to Julie de Lebrun's show, which is always held in the same place apparently. I think this place is used as a showroom or like an event space. Maybe it's a store, maybe a headquarters. Either way, it's one of the most beautiful and intimate spaces that I went to on this entire trip. It is the kind of building that you kind of wish you could just be alone in and meditate or just like read or something. Most of the looks were already walking around in this beautiful courtyard. Breakfast was being served. With only a few dozen people in attendance, I felt more like I was at a private showing for VICs than a runway show. You can tell how tight the space is because I get like trapped here while I'm just walking around. The models just literally waited outside and then popped in one at a time when it was showtime. Julie is an industry woman and she is extremely qualified. She studied fashion, she worked for Gianfranco Ferré, she assisted for Gianni Versace, she joined Prada during what many would refer to as Prada's golden era, eventually working closely with Miuccia herself. She headed women's wear at Louis Vuitton under Marc Jacobs. She was artistic director for Sonia Raquel for 5 years. Of the hundreds of thousands of people who contribute to fashion design all over the globe, Julie is in the top 100 most qualified and decorated designers in the world. Okay, so considering all of that, here are some things that I would expect of any designer who has those kinds of qualifications on paper. One, they would just tick all the boxes of a fashion collection. There's a definite theme, there's variety, there's a color palette, artistic first look, merchandisable second look, bridal on the last look. Two, I would expect that an industry veteran of this caliber would mostly be creating extremely sellable clothes. And three, just lots of polish everywhere. Everything is just tuned to a T. But you know what? Julie's show was nothing like those very canned expectations. This felt like a very personal show. We already talked about the location being unorthodox, but also the models were mostly Julie's friends, family, and family of friends. Julie herself was in the show, like wearing one of the looks. You can just see her stepping out here and then just walking the floor. And this collection was not extremely merchandisable in the best way. I saw a collection by a woman who seemed no longer confined by another creative's vision anymore. She is not working for another creative director. She does not have a board to answer to like maybe was happening at Sonia Raquel. I mostly saw a collection here that was a designer curiously following their own interests. Like, look at this one in particular. I know that we've all seen fully sequined pieces before. I just really like how this one was handled. This is really beautiful work. This was the last look. I loved this. It was a great closer. This is far from Julie's first show under her eponymous label, and I am very clearly late to the party on all of this, so I'll be the first to admit that I do not understand Julie's design language yet, but I'm really curious about it, and I want to learn more. I can't be completely positive when I say this yet, but I think that this type of collection is what freedom looks like for a fashion designer, which is pretty cool. Back again to the Palais de Tokyo and back again with Yuima Nakazato, our second show with the brilliant Japanese designer. The mood at these shows is pretty ominous, this time especially because of the mirrors all over the floor. Yuima is already a very theatrical designer, but especially in this period of his work because the clothes shown here are part of the costuming for a recent staging of Idomeneo, which is a Mozart opera from 1781 based on another opera from 1712, and the opera itself is about ancient Greece. To me, what makes Idomeneo a really interesting play is that no matter when it was being staged, you're always watching multiple centuries interpret the ancient past, which is kind of cool. And in Yuima's vision, it is heaving and epic. These clothes, as a runway collection, are mostly bound together by a literal red thread. The play itself does a lot of work with these like red net type things, which Yuima has knitted into the core theme of his collection. The red nets, which loosely symbolize fate in the play, have fully entangled almost everyone in the show. Not everything has the red yarn in it. Like, there's a few looks where they're like haunted by the ghost of the red yarn. But even among the looks that use the red yarn, there is a lot of variety in the fit and how the yarn itself is actually knitted, which I wish we could have gotten more information about, but I think we're just left to sort of look and wonder at these pieces. For me, the biggest part of the show wasn't any of the looks that are listed on Tagwalk, but these unbelievable pieces that were kind of meant to be, I think, in the background, sort of stage setting. Covered in these ceramic coin-like objects, these jingled in this deliciously atmospheric way. I have to confess that I couldn't take my eyes off of these the entire show. We spoke briefly to Yuima after the show was finished. Last season and this season also, there was a lot of use of netting, and not the microscopic netting, but big, almost like fishing type of nets. Could you just talk about that use and that motif a little bit?
Yes. So it's kind of, starting with Opera Idomeneo, and the costume, I designed a costume for Opera Idomeneo, and was a kind of armor, but usually armor made by metal, but I tried to make the ceramic, which is very sensitive. So it's a very fragile, and I try to overlap with tailoring suits. Now it's today, so armors and suits are overlapping for me, past and today, and the tailoring suits are like kind of melting, and kind of inside of the body comes out. So it's kind of red. It's, human has the same color. Everybody has the red color. So when you take off the garment, it's red color comes out. That's the kind of messages. Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about the sound? Because that's something that clothes we never talk about, is the sound of the clothes.
Yeah. Well, actually, this actually field recording. The ceramic dress made beautiful sounds. So composer are recording sound of the dress, and then try to mix with music of the Idomeneo orchestra music. So kind of primitive ceramic sounds combining with orchestra music. Yeah.
This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Another insanely hot day in Paris and nearby the Palais Garnier. We happen upon a giant crowd for the Victor and Rolf show. Here's something I really like about Victor and Rolf. Is it wacky? Yes. Is it at times unwearable? Sure. But when these guys come up with a crazy idea, they follow through. There is no half-assing anything at these shows. Victor and Rolf show up every fucking time. Like, what if big geometric shapes were passing through regular clothes? What if your shoulders were taking the general shape of a slice of cheesecake? According to Victor and Rolf, your whole body really looks like a cocktail table, and if not a table, it's some other piece of Memphis furniture colliding with fashion. It's their classic absurdist and abstract viewpoint through the same eyes as Roy Lichtenstein, for example. Graphic and bold with some welcome little cliches to make it fun. Victor and Rolf's style has been pretty distinctive in their recent work. Like, you can always tell which look was made by Viktor and Rolf just through a single picture. And that should be seen as somewhat more impressive when you consider that their absurdist camp style is still managing to find opportunities after so many shows. I don't know, like the upside down dress, the I'm not shy, I just don't like you dress, these crazy shoulders, this prismatic tube, they're absolutely all made by the same people. And as your interpreter, I gotta be honest and say that I can't guide you to a tidy explanation of this collection, but we should absolutely emphasize that this is the most chaotic that I have seen these men design in a while. Like, look 17. Even if we ignore the hair and the big shape of the clothes, it's like a purple and white motif under a polka dot belt with a jacquard that really just pops off the screen there. Very three-dimensional. Polka dots again on the legs, and then shoes that look like a prism. Not a prison, like a prism. Also, look at this. I mean, covered buttons. Guys, you really think of everything. At this point, in the summer of 2024, we have experienced many different eras of Robert Woon. But lately, since he started showing in Paris on the Couture calendar, he has been consciously incorporating an environmental aspect to his clothes. So, like, what does that mean? You're caught in the rain, or caught in the snow this season, or you've entirely been swarmed by butterflies, as if you're wearing the experience of walking around in a giant conservatory. With Robert Woon's Couture, you're very often getting thrown into this realm where this over-the-top surrealism isn't just the kind that like AI has generated. Robert creates a real handmade garment that you can touch and wear, and in this line of thinking, you can experience. Let's back it up a little bit. This show's theme is time. I think Robert maybe was looking at the length of time that it takes to create these 25 looks to the standard of Parisian couture. I mean, y'all, look at this beading. It is beading that convincingly looks like snow. It should hopefully not come as any surprise to you how long it takes certain couture garments to be made. That's also what makes couture irreplaceable. There's no software or machine that can recreate this stuff. And those hours in the life of Robert Woon the man and his atelier are likely going to be filled with tens of thousands of hours of actually slowly making clothes. The show notes talk a lot about how like the show is a journey through life, ending with our literal end, split into 4 different looks. The skin, your flesh, your bones, and then finally your soul. It's kind of, I at least felt when I was watching this that Robert was like, if you're going to be a part of this, you gotta do it with every part of you. All of Mr. Woon's work is like this. I feel a lot of sincerity coming out of it. It's not just trying to hide the magic of this brand somewhere that no one will find it. This hat is a giant swoosh, and there's a butterfly on top of it. Even the most like drapey, soft looks, they just end up looking incredibly severe and angular. Like in the way that the models were told to pose, or these extra sharp umbrellas, which have become one of Robert Woon's signatures alongside all of his other vehicles for creating excitement. There's a lot of couture right now that is dramatic and epic and campy. Like, to be honest, we're probably in the dramatic, campy, golden era of couture right now. But because Robert Woon is focused on transporting you to an experience, this work operates on a whole different emotional plane. So I gotta say, this brand, Artesai, is super special to us because we've been covering Bahara Artakani's bid for haute couture since our first ever Paris Fashion Week video. And it's really special to have watched Artesai find their voice. Bahara's obsession with math and science has remained the backbone of her design language, and it is more prominent than ever with this show, which is named Calabi Yao after a component of string theory.
Try to Google how to pronounce it.
Yeah, sure.
Calabi Yao formatted. Calabi-Yau formatted.
What? I don't know if that's right. I'm more of a liberal arts guy, so I had not heard of this before we started researching for this show, but it is literally the main picture on the Wikipedia page. That's what this is. The geometrical shapes and silhouettes this season are inspired by the shape of the Calabi-Yau, which, put simply, is a geometric pattern that looks like this. And looks 1, 2, 3, and 4 could maybe be seen as Bahara's showing us different representations of this crazy abstract shape, but in real life, which would involve showing it to us in as many ways and dimensions as you can. At least that's how I've read the first 4 looks. It's a survey of the full Calabi-Yau. As more of a liberal arts guy, I think of this kind of like how in Cubism you're looking at multiple angles of the same figure at the same time. So the roundness of this thing is very reminiscent of nature, which is another huge point of inspiration behind Artezai's philosophy. I love this side of Artezai. It reminds us that the breathtaking beauty of nature cannot be disconnected from math and science, and it shows us how they're so closely intertwined with that beautiful nature. Nowhere is this more prominent than in look 9. I love this look, where these tiered scales or petals morph and grow into the structure of the Calabi-Yau, which is seen in the train. Here we can see how the roundness of the Calabi-Yau also appears to look like the shape of orchids, which created a phalanx out of a skirt in look 13. And then in look 19, you can't tell what is a flower or what is the shape of the Calabi-Yau. Whatever is going on here, it just consumes the wearer in this stunningly beautiful mess. It's all just about how you perceive it, which is an excellent added layer to Bahara's work. I also loved that the final bridal look is not a pure white. It is this beautiful, like almost gray purple. The shape of this gown is just fantastic too. After the show, I got to catch up briefly with Bahara to hear her words.
Thank you so much.
This was unbelievable. This was so good. Yeah. It seems like you found new ways of kind of expanding on the like microscopic geometry thing.
Yes.
Because there was so much variety of looks. Could you kind of talk to me a little bit about kind of other natural things that you've noticed that inspired all of this?
Well, it's the collection was about string theory. I was super inspired by that and kind of transferring that to the ideas of embroidery, the pleating, the shapes. So having these very small sculptures in some kind of geometrical movement, but then expressing that in a bigger sense as well.
So just have one other question. I know you have a lot of people to talk to. Ending it with a Joy Division song like almost made me cry because it started out with music that was very haute couture and then we switched to full like industrial stuff.
It was a way to say who I am.
Yeah. Do we both like Joy Division? I can't believe we've never talked about that. This is beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll see you soon. Okay, a very bizarre change up here that I need to kind of let you know about. After Men's Fashion Week was complete and Couture Week was complete, we then jumped on a plane and hopped over to rural Italy for one more stop. Outside of Venice, Italy, is an area where the vast majority of designer clothes that say made in Italy are manufactured. And in the heart of this area is the headquarters and artisanal workroom of Jeffrey B. Small.
People don't realize is that great clothes making is far more complex than people think it is.
He has stopped this is crazy. He has stopped showing in Paris because his buyers make special trips to come to him. And so did we, and you are about to find out why. If you have not seen anything from Jeffrey B. Small before, buckle up. Very excited. Roll clip.
I've been working in Cavartere for about 25 years now, and this is our most expanded workrooms to date. It's the most advanced handmade clothing facility in the industry. It's rendering an amazing capability artistically to do pieces that we don't think anybody else in the game can do.
Can we look at that collection?
Sure.
Let's look at it.
We start off with 2 suits. Hand pad stitch jacket on Varese iridescent linen with full surgeon's cuffs, working buttonholes.
And that's actually something that I have learned from you is that there are certain elements of what we would call quality that have become so rare in the industry that even many designers don't even know to look for it. Like, I mean, the big one for me that was mind-blowing is the processes to the stuff to achieve the hand of the actual pieces. Weathered but brand new look is extremely difficult to achieve, and it's something that I think you said you've been working on for 25 years at this point. What else we got?
Okay, over here we have some exciting new textured cloths from Varese, which is the leading region in northern Italy for cottons and linens. This is a pure cotton, very textured seersucker weave, striped, hand-dyed, dark. Wonderful feel, which I'm afraid your viewers can't really experience, but maybe they can hear how crisp it is. And we have a new silk print from the Brena family in Como. Wonderful floral, which was then specially dyed by hand in our tintoria workrooms. What we call an accident dye using blue pigments, and just has this beautiful, beautiful effect on a raglan short sleeve silk shirt with real mother of pearl buttons. Lots of beautiful details.
And you have always been, around me, you've been very quick, or really to anyone, you've been very quick to acknowledge who outside of the GBS workrooms contributes to this standard of quality. And the Brena family is one that you continuously go back to because you have audited as many suppliers as you possibly can, and you have determined yourself that they are the ones who really are producing the absolute highest quality for the needs of this specific shirt.
Yeah, we're just trying step by step, and it takes forever. It takes a long time. We're just trying to go. Once we got to the point where our main fabrics and our linings reached that level, then it was going even further into all the other components that go into creating the garment. What else we got? Okay, over here we've got another story of pure Como silk prints from the Brena family. So you can see very much the Venetian lagoon coloration showing up in some of these prints. Really, really beautiful paisleys, mother of pearl buttons, all done in different ways. I don't know if your camera can catch those. But these are all very, very nice. And again, we're trying to follow that color story of the greens and the browns and the grays and the blues.
That right there is a great example of the treatment and how the treatments that you're able to do to an existing silk, where that started out looking like this.
That's right.
It started out looking, and this one's been treated on some level, but it's much closer to the original thing. For you to be able to go from essentially this to this just in your tintoria that is right back there, I mean, I really think that this is the thing that speaks the best to how advanced and how purposeful the dyeing and the treatments that you do. Yeah. I like it a lot.
Thank you. We got into dyeing about 25 years ago, and for me, as a tailor, it was sort of the next dimension. Then we've got another very, very interesting, and part of what we were doing was we were playing with some new trouser shapes. This is another great suspender trouser. Again, one of these silk suspenders. Now, this leg has inverse pleat, and then it's got a lot of volume around through the thigh, and then it sort of comes in just a little bit. I don't know if you can catch that in the camera. Maybe you'll have to try it on, and
I'll be trying most of them on. Don't worry.
But it's got a very new, interesting shape that works at this length. If we make it longer, it doesn't look so good. If we make it shorter, it doesn't look so good. It has to be at that length. But at that length, it is really a remarkable new shape for a trouser, especially one for summer, and it hooks up really well with a more classic 3-button ticket pocket hand-built jacket.
If I remember correctly, this is one where you said the intention is to button the top button rather than what you would do with literally every other suit.
That's right,
in the world, which is the middle one.
Yeah, we're stressing on this particular collection. We're doing 3-button single-breasted jackets. But the idea here is we've shifted the button position down a few centimeters, and the idea is you're going to button the top button before you button any other button on the jacket. You could button the top and the second, but we don't want you buttoning just a second. We want you starting at the top because everything's being cut and shaped in a way to give a very, very new, unique line for a 3-button single-breasted suit.
Yeah.
And the last piece is pure cotton, hand-woven, and very, very loosely woven, so there's all sorts of air pockets flowing through. Carlo and I had long discussions. He was afraid that it's too loosely woven. I said, no, we have to make it light. We have to make it breathable because we've got to be thinking about all of our clients in these really, really hot climates. More and more we have to design for global warming. Buttons used here are very interesting, clear horn tinted jade green. And I think they go really, really nicely with these tones. Also very, very elegant, classy button.
Something I really like about this piece in particular is that the weave is so open that when you tug on any part of it, as the piece moves, you can see kind of this ripple effect as it goes out. You can see the tension expressed across the yarn. This is something where like people refer to textiles as the first human technology. This, I think, is a great example that can kind of help someone who's never really thought about that sort of understand it.
Very much. I mean, you're going to be hard-pressed to see a fabric like that in your normal, rummaging through stores. It's very, very beautiful just as an object, the fabric itself. And then,
well, yeah, I mean, I try not to over-narrativize whenever we do this, but you feel these clothes and it ruins your hand for the rest of your life.
So, I hope that's good.
It is a very good thing. Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you very much.
Give him a mic and Jeffrey can talk about these incredible details for a long time. If you join the Patreon now, you can see just under an hour of him explaining what makes just this collection so special. Go join the Patreon. We have that one by him. We have another hour-long video of Jeffrey talking about the in-depth nuances of his clothes, along with a ton more. We are now making our way over to the showroom of Leon Emmanuel Blanc. Leon has maybe the most beautiful setup for a showroom in Paris. He never puts on shows, at least not since we've been covering him, but his showrooms are such an excellent way of doing this because he's able to explain all of the wild processes, materials, and shapes that he's incorporated into the collection. He is very much the archetype of the conceptual fashion designer, and he pulls it off super well. And it's not overly serious. There's always a little hint of whimsy, which, I mean, knowing my luck, will it go in and this will be like the most serious collection he's ever produced. Blanc. Someone told us at the party the other day, they were like, oh, it's Blanc, actually. And I was like, oh, okay. And then literally on the walk up. We are now making our way over to the showroom of Leon Emmanuel Blanc. It's all good. Let's see, what are some of the kind of premier pieces that you're really proud of that maybe kind of go into some new territory?
Right, so actually for the first time I was able to perfect a symbiosis sole. So this is a resin type that I developed with a German resin company, and finally it actually works. Took me actually forever to get the right mixture done and all these things, but I'm very proud of this.
So I'm assuming that before it was a chemical problem that you couldn't quite get right?
It just didn't work well.
Is there an easy way to explain what that chemical problem was?
So with resins you typically have two components, A and B, and one being the hardener and the other actually being the resin. And with something that you would use as a sole, you would have to have a certain type of elasticity vs hardness. So the less hard, the more soft, obviously, but then it walks off, the sole breaks easier.
So you're essentially trying to make a resin behave like a rubber.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that was rather hard. But,
yeah, that sounds hard, dude. But I mean, could you give it a little bend?
Yeah.
So we can see?
So it's like completely fresh, but
yeah, I mean, it
just walks it in.
It's like a boot now.
Yeah. Yes.
Can I zoom in on his shoes real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Because this is a great, how long have you been wearing these?
2 years.
Okay. And so the part of the resin kind of begins to sort of just slough off in a natural way.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so cool. Okay. And I kind of want to, I mean, I'll let you choose the rest of them, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about this because this style of jacket that you make, it almost is like the pattern cutting equivalent of like sketching almost.
Yes.
Seems like.
Yeah.
Is this one just following the same pattern as the one that we covered 2 years ago, or?
No, this is
two seasons ago.
Yeah, two seasons ago. No, this is actually a different piece. This is called LJ10, which is based on my first jacket I ever made, called LJ. At the time, I only had one jacket. It was called leather jacket, so it's LJ for leather jacket. This is LJ10 because I made it after 10 years of the original one. and basically features all the things from the original, just with some slight enhancements, like fully lined zippers in the sleeves, so you can, wear some jewelry. It's probably my favorite jacket at this point.
And this is the one that's based off of your brother.
Yes, exactly. This jacket was originally from my brother, and he has riped a tendon in one of his shoulders, so his shoulders is dropped. And in the original SJ, you would always feel that if you wear the jacket, like one shoulder fits normally, and the other one's like kind of pulling you down.
What does your brother think about that?
I mean, I haven't really spoken to this about him with him about this for a while, so I don't know.
I love that there's kind of tonal differences between the leather pieces. The little inconsistencies are perfect. So cool.
And also here, like these things then just happen like this.
Okay, closing thoughts. Daniela, what was your favorite show?
Jean-Paul Gaultier.
Jean-Paul Gaultier?
Yeah.
And Felice?
He did a great job.
He really did. That seemed like it was one of your favorite shows that you've ever attended ever. What made that so I mean, you wrote the review, but what, in a word, what made that so impactful for you?
Subtle.
It was really subtle.
It was a very, very good display of subtlety.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of have to give it to Thom Browne, I think. They are so fully in their lane at this point that it is wonderful to see this in its beaming golden era. Was there a specific look or product and just one tiny thing that really stuck with you?
The Hermès Twilly shirt. Oh my gosh,
really?
That thing is brilliant.
Yeah, that was really, really special. And it's one of those things where it's like if someone buys that and really works that into their life, that could become that thing where it's like, oh, when I think of blank person, I think of that shirt.
Starter pack includes.
Yeah, starter pack for one individual person. I think for me, the number one really crazy thing was that one shirt by Jeffrey B. Small. Really, really open weave and just the colors. I loved that shirt. I loved that textile. It was the stuff from the Colombo family. Yeah, it's beautiful. Okay, so one thing about Fashion Week in particular that's really funny is that everyone is always doing the mwah, mwah, double cheek kiss thing, which apologies to all French friends of mine again for not ever doing that correctly. I think we unfortunately have to stick to handshakes now because Daniela and I get sick every single Fashion Week. And I know that the double cheek kissing, while completely culturally appropriate, is part of that. We should also probably bring some hand sanitizer around with us. So yeah, if anyone notices us making that switch, it's not because we don't love you. It's because we're so tired of being sick. And being sick and making a massive mega video like this is a waking nightmare. Yeah. It's a waking nightmare.
But we do it for you.
But we do it for you, folks. We're here for you. Hey, if you actually made your way through this entire video, I am so incredibly grateful. You giving your most precious resource, which is your time, to what we make is just, there is no feeling in the world like this. It is, we are incredibly honored. I also want to kind of say something that I have to emphasize really, really strongly, and I don't want to do it in the wrong way. Ultimately, what this is it's a thank you to our patrons. I just want to be so clear about something. There is no way for us to do this with YouTube money. There is no way for us to do this through sponsorships. I know when you watch Mr. Beast videos and stuff, it's this is sponsored by NordVPN. We cannot do that. The sponsorships are either not available to us because we're not big enough, or they bring in so little money and it's so undependable that we have no way of running the channel off of this. The only way that we can do this is by people supporting us with money. Now, if this is your first video from us and you were kind of mid about the entire thing, this is not directed at you. I really don't, I truly am not in a situation where I want someone who's ugh, the videos are okay, but I just feel so bad, so I guess I'll sign up. I'm really not interested in those people's money. Really, all that we ask is just that if you are receiving benefit from these videos, and what that means is if we helped you to think about things in a different way, if we helped you understand something that you had been struggling with in the past, if we have made it where you feel more informed when you are going to make your next purchase, That is the kind of thing that hopefully we're giving to as many people as possible, and I hope that you reflect that benefit back to us through the Patreon so that we can keep giving benefit the other way. I am also thrilled to say that this video is a turning point for the channel. We are going to start releasing much higher quality videos a little bit less often. I am really excited to get started on that. This video, of course, is expected because we do it every Paris Fashion Week, but it'll be about 2-3 weeks between this one and the next one, and then you're gonna get just such an awesome video. I'm so excited to start into these. We have a lot of great stuff lined up for you, including a project that is even somehow bigger than this one that is gonna be coming hopefully late this year, maybe early next year. Look forward to that. I can't thank you enough. You're all the best. Go get on that Patreon if you really love this and you're bummed that it's over so that you can see the extended interviews. They are unbelievable. They share some great stuff. Love you all. Mean it. See ya.
Hell yeah.
Sweet. You like it?
Outro done? Yeah.